Bully lured by LordNoname James Khan, a regular teen, faces the brutal reality of schoolyard bullying. A vicious attack by his tormentor leaves James dead. However, in a twist of fate, James is inexplicably granted a second chance at life. Along with this do-over comes an enigmatic entity called the bully system. This mysterious program assigns James a series of strange missions and challenges, all seemingly focused on making him stronger. With a newfound purpose and a powerful system at his back, James embarks on a journey of self-improvement. Can he navigate the treacherous world of bullies while unraveling the secrets of the bully system? Will he use his newfound strength for vengeance or forge a new path? 16-year-old James Khan pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the classroom window. Rain lashed against the pane, blurring the scene below into a watercolor of grays and browns. Yet, even through the distortion, James could make out the tableau unfolding in the schoolyard. A knot of senior boys, their faces etched with a practiced sneer, had cornered a smaller figure huddled against the wall. The smaller boy, probably a nervous junior classman, was clutching his bag protectively. Even from this distance, James could see the tremor in his shoulders. The ringleader, a hulking boy with a shaved head and a cruel glint in his eye, leaned menacingly close. His lips curled into a sneer, revealing a chipped tooth. The words James couldn't hear were a script he knew by heart, a script he'd memorized through countless unwilling viewings. It began with a curt demand, a question punctuated by a raised eyebrow and a tightened fist. The answer, etched on the victim's face, was always the same: a flicker of fear, a desperate hope that this time, maybe this time, it would be enough. The smaller boy reached tremblingly into his bag, pulling out a crumpled wad of bills. He stuffed them into the outstretched hand of the ringleader, who snatched them with a sneer. But the sneer quickly morphed into a scowl. "That all?" he barked, his voice hoarse. The smaller boy shook his head, his eyes pleading. James saw a flicker of something in those eyes, a desperation, maybe even a flicker of defiance. But defiance was a luxury he couldn't afford. The ringleader shoved the smaller boy against the wall, a snarl twisting his features. A sickening crack echoed through the rain, a fist connecting with flesh. The smaller boy crumpled to the ground, a whimper escaping his lips. James felt a familiar knot of anger twist in his gut. He slammed his fist against the windowpane, a silent scream trapped in his throat. This wasn't the first time he'd witnessed these acts of schoolyard tyranny. He'd seen it happen countless times before, always turning a blind eye, choosing the safety of his own anonymity. But today, something shifted within him. The rain beating against the window seemed to mirror the storm brewing inside him. This time, he wouldn't just watch. The question was, what would he do? James slumped back in his chair, the anger slowly curdling into a familiar stew of self-doubt. He wasn't exactly built for heroics. At 5'8" with an average build, he looked more like a beanpole than a potential savior. His face, while not unattractive, lacked the rugged handsomeness some of the students possessed. He was a 9th grader at Banana High, a good student but perpetually stuck in the almost category, never quite reaching the coveted top spot. This, coupled with his studious nature, earned him the unfortunate title of nerd, a label that felt like a second skin, a constant reminder of his perceived weakness. The image of the smaller boy flinching under the blows hammered at James' conscience. He knew the sting of being ostracized, the feeling of being powerless. But what could he, a self-proclaimed nerd, possibly do against those hulking figures? The thought of intervening sent a tremor through him. What if they turned on him? The bullies seemed to operate under a code of silence. No one snitched, no one intervened. Stepping in meant risking his own place in the school's precarious social hierarchy. Yet, the image of the rain-slicked courtyard, the whimpers echoing through the storm, refused to fade. A spark, faint but undeniable, ignited within him. James wasn't known for his bravery, but neither was he known for letting others suffer in silence. Perhaps, he thought, bravery wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. Maybe it was about finding the courage to do what you knew was right, even when every fiber of your being screamed otherwise. He glanced around the classroom. Most of his classmates seemed oblivious, their heads buried deep in textbooks. Were they truly unaware? or were they choosing to ignore it like he always had? A few days later, a simmering resentment bubbled within James as he watched from the window. The same group of bullies, emboldened by their previous victory, had shifted their target. This time, it was a group of girls, their laughter morphing into nervous worry under the boys' crude advances. James clenched his fists. He yearned for a way to vanquish these bullies, a way as swift and final as the strokes of a pen in his favorite manga, Death Note. In that fantastical world, a mysterious notebook held the power to erase a person's life simply by writing their name within its pages. The concept both horrified and fascinated James. While he would never condone such violence, a part of him couldn't help but relish the idea of a world free from these tormentors. But reality, as always, held no such shortcuts. There were no magical notebooks, no easy solutions. He was stuck with the very real problem of these bullies and the helpless girls they were harassing. Suddenly, a voice jolted him out of his brooding. James, look what I got." It was Emdad, his classmate and one of the few who didn't actively bully him. Unlike James, Emdad was anything but overlooked. His father, a successful businessman, showered him with the latest gadgets and clothes. Today, it was a brand new iPhone, glinting in the afternoon sun. "Wow," James managed, a flicker of envy tugging at him. He'd never owned anything remotely close to an iPhone. His hobbies leaned towards nerdier pursuits, like historical reenactments and building model airplanes, which he found endlessly fascinating. Video games held little appeal to him, and the exorbitant cost of these devices put them firmly out of reach. Still, a part of him couldn't help but yearn for something new, something that might bridge the gap between him and his classmates. However, curiosity overcame his envy. He took the phone from Emdad, its sleek design cool against his palm. Emdad, radiating a newfound confidence, explained, "I heard girls dig earphones. Maybe this'll finally help me score a date." James watched, dumbfounded, as Emdad approached the group of girls, the phone a beacon in his hand. To his surprise, the girls, who had been ignoring Emdad just a few days ago, now seemed genuinely interested in Emdad and his new toy. "Wow, is that the new iPhone 14? squealed Annika, her eyes wide with fascination. "Emdad, can we see it?" chimed in Maya, leaning closer to get a better look. Emdad, preening under the attention, unlocked the phone and began to show off the features. "It's got this amazing camera, perfect for selfies," he said, swiping through the high-resolution images. "And look at these games," he continued, launching a popular racing game. The girls crowded around, giggling as Emdad expertly navigated a virtual car around the track. James felt a pang of something akin to betrayal. Was this all it took to impress them? A fancy gadget? A bitter truth settled in James' stomach. Maybe Emdad was right. Maybe material possessions, like earphones, held a certain allure, a shortcut to popularity that academic achievements and a kind heart couldn't provide. But was that the kind of connection he truly desired? He glanced back at the window, where the rain continued to fall, mirroring the storm of emotions churning within him. Dread pulled in James' stomach as he rounded the corner on his way home. There, illuminated by a flickering street lamp, was a scene straight out of his nightmares. The familiar group of bullies, led by the hulking Lemon, had cornered Emdad in a dingy alleyway. Emdad, his new iPhone clutched protectively to his chest, cowered under Lemon's menacing glare. "Hand it over, fatty," Lemon sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "That phone practically screams for an upgrade." James' heart hammered against his ribs. He knew he should turn back, disappear into the shadows and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But the image of Emdad, his usually boisterous personality reduced to a whimper, sparked a flicker of defiance within James. He couldn't just stand by. Taking a deep breath, he made a phone call to certain someone. Then James stepped forward, his voice surprisingly steady despite his racing pulse. "Hey, what's going on here?" All heads turned towards him. Lemon, towering over James by a good 6 inches, narrowed his eyes. A cruel smile stretched across his face. "Who are you, twerp?" "This ain't your business." James squared his shoulders, trying to project an air of confidence he didn't entirely feel. "It becomes my business when you're picking on someone," he retorted. "Leave him alone." The other bullies snickered, a chorus of jeers erupting from the group. James felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He knew this was a mistake, but there was no turning back now. Lemon's amusement faded, replaced by a cold fury. "Listen here, Pipsqueak," he growled, taking a menacing step towards James. "This is between me and Fatty here. You better scram before you get hurt." Adrenaline surged through James, momentarily drowning out the tremor in his voice. "No," he insisted, surprising even himself with his resolve. "You're picking on him because he's easy prey. That's not okay." "And what about the girls yesterday? Were they easy prey too?" Lemon's eyes narrowed. "What are you yapping about, nerd?" he snarled. "You think you can just walk around, taking whatever you want?" James continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "This isn't some kind of video game where you get points for bullying people. This is real life, and it hurts." One of Lemon's cronies, a skinny boy with a cruel glint in his eye, piped up. "Yeah, what are you gonna do about it, twerp?" James met his gaze. "I'm going to stand up for what's right," he declared. "Maybe you all should try it sometime." Lemon's face contorted with rage. "Shut your mouth, nerd," he roared, launching himself towards James with a fist aimed for his face. Years ago, James' father, a former martial arts enthusiast, had patiently drilled some basic self-defense techniques into him. The lessons, mostly ignored and forgotten in the face of more pressing academic pursuits, now flickered back to life in James' mind. Almost on autopilot, his arms shot up in a rudimentary block, forearms crossed to form a barrier just in time. The sickening thud of bone against flesh echoed in the narrow alleyway as Lemon's fist connected with James' defenses. Pain flared through James' arms, a white-hot shock that threatened to buckle his knees. But he held firm, the impact thankfully glancing off his forearms rather than landing squarely on his face. Lemon, surprised by the unexpected resistance, stumbled back a few steps, momentarily stunned. The world seemed to slow down for James, the rain a hazy curtain around him. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Bullies weren't supposed to be met with resistance, and nerds certainly weren't supposed to block punches. Lemon's smirk was wide and nasty, the kind that made James's stomach clench. Well, Lemon drawled, stepping closer, his voice dripping with fake surprise. "Look what we have here." "Didn't know you were such a punching bag, nerd." He punctuated nerd with a flick of his wrist, as if dismissing James with a casual wave. Lemon's gang, a motley crew of schoolyard toughs, shuffled forward, flanking their leader like backup dancers in a terrible play. One, skinny and wiry, with arms like sticks and eyes that darted around nervously, was the first to act. He lunged, his fist to blur, connecting squarely with James's right shoulder. "Oh!" James gasped, a sharp, burning pain erupting through his arm. Numbness spread quickly, like cold water seeping into fabric. He instinctively cradled his injured arm, blinking rapidly. "Hey!" he managed to sputter, more surprised than angry. Initially, before James could even register what had fully happened, a shadow loomed over him. This one was different, bigger, broader, with fists that looked like they could crush a watermelon. He was the muscle of Lemon's little operation. The big bully wound up, a grunt escaping his lips with a swing, and his fist slammed into James's jaw. Crack! The sound echoed in James's ears, sharp and sickening. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Dizziness washed over him in a dizzying wave. He stumbled back, feet tangling, vision blurring at the edges. "Whoa," he mumbled, his head spinning. Confused, disoriented, and now genuinely hurt, James instinctively raised his arms, a pathetic attempt to shield himself from the onslaught. Punches rained down. A sickening thud against his ribs stole his breath. A sharp kick connected with his shin, sending jolts of pain up his leg. Another fist slammed into his face, near his eye this time, making his vision swim even more. Each impact was a fresh wave of agony. He felt utterly helpless, a ragdoll being tossed around by a group of cruel kids. Lemon was winding up for a final, triumphant kick, a nasty grin plastered across his face. "This is for being such a," he started, but the rest of his insult was cut short. "Freeze, police!" The command boomed through the alley, slicing through the tense air like a siren. A figure emerged from the shadows at the alley entrance, bathed in the orange glow of a nearby street lamp. Relief, so potent it almost made his knees buckle, flooded James. Officer Khan. His dad. James had always dreaded this scenario. Dad showing up at school, Dad getting involved, the ultimate embarrassment, the perfect way to make things even worse. But right now, with his body screaming in protest and fear, a cold fist in his gut, he needed help desperately. Just moments before the beating escalated further, in a surge of panic and quick thinking, he'd fumbled for his phone, adrenaline coursing through him. One shaky thumb press on speed dial. Dad. He'd whispered a frantic, broken explanation into the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Dad, alley behind the school. Lemon, please, hurry. Luckily, patrol schedules worked in his favor. Dad was close. Police were coming. Lemon's smug grin vanished as if wiped away with a cloth. His swagger evaporated, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. The other bullies, suddenly realizing the game had changed, shifted nervously, their bravado grumbling faster than cheap cookies. Their tough guy stances melted into awkward shuffles and averted gazes. Officer Khan strode into the alley, his uniform crisp, his presence radiating authority. He planted his hands on his hips, surveying the scene, his voice resonating with controlled power. "All right," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the group. "What in the world is going on here? Someone want to explain themselves, right now?" Lemon, the self-proclaimed king of the schoolyard, suddenly found his tongue tied in knots. He stammered, his voice cracking, the arrogance completely gone. "You are broken bar, I saw a broken bar, see a broken bar, we a broken bar, we weren't a broken bar," he floundered, searching for a plausible lie, his eyes darting around for inspiration. Dad, Lemon's usual target, surprisingly stepped forward, seizing the opportunity. He puffed out his chest, emboldened by the presence of law enforcement. "Officer," he declared, his voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with each word, "they were trying to steal my phone." "Yeah. They surrounded me and tried to grab my phone." James, still clutching his throbbing shoulder and jaw, and wincing with every breath, nodded weakly in agreement. "Yeah," he mumbled, his voice hoarse and strained, "my friend. They were trying to rob him." Officer Khan, his eyes sharp and discerning, didn't miss the bruises blooming on James's face and the obvious fear still clinging to Dad. He sized up the bullies, their hangdog expressions and shuffling feet painting a clear picture. "Right," he said slowly, his voice laced with skepticism. "Well, we'll sort this out at the station." He gestured to his partner, who had just arrived. In moments, handcuffs were clicking, and the bullies, their bravado completely extinguished, were being led away, muttering and protesting weakly. James, still shaky and sore, watched them go, a strange mix of relief and lingering fear washing over him. He turned to his dad, expecting a broken bar. Well, he didn't know what. Disappointment? Anger? Instead, Officer Khan knelt beside him, his expression softening with concern. "You okay, James?" he asked, his voice gentle. James managed a weak smile, wincing as his jaw protested. "Yeah, I think so," he mumbled. "Just a broken bar saw." Officer Khan's gaze shifted, a flicker of pride entering his eyes. "Good for you, James," he said, patting him gently on the uninjured shoulder. "Standing up for yourself and your friend." "That was brave." James smiled again, a genuine smile this time, even if it still hurt his jaw. His stomach still churned with nerves and residual fear, and every part of his body ached. He felt weak and battered, but beneath the pain, a different feeling was growing. A quiet strength, a newfound resilience. He had fought back, in his own way. He had been hurt, yes, but he was also a broken bar stronger. Maybe stronger than he ever thought he could be. A month had passed, and a fragile peace had settled over James' world. The bullies, chastened by their 2-month suspension and court-mandated anger management classes, had become a distant memory. The schoolyard no longer echoed with the sounds of intimidation, replaced by a sense of tentative normalcy. James walked with his head held a little higher, a newfound confidence simmering beneath his usual reserved demeanor. One evening, as the familiar orange glow of the setting sun dipped below the horizon, James was making his way home from his karate class, a newfound hobby his father had encouraged after the incident. The rhythmic thwack of his punches against the heavy bag echoed in his mind, a testament to his newfound determination. He rounded a corner, whistling a tuneless melody, his mind already drifting towards the upcoming history exam. Suddenly, a hulking figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. James' heart lurched into his throat. It was Lemon, his face etched with a familiar sneer, and flanking him were his two cronies, their expressions mirroring their leader's malice. James' stomach clenched, the memory of the alleyway attack sending a fresh wave of nausea washing over him. He averted his gaze, desperately trying to formulate an escape plan. Maybe if he just walked past them quickly, pretended not to see them, they wouldn't bother him. But as if sensing his intention, Lemon reached out a meaty hand and clamped it down on his shoulder. Well, Lemon drawled, his voice dripping with a sickening sweetness. Look who it is. The mighty nerd who got us suspended. James remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. He wouldn't give Lemon the satisfaction of seeing his fear. Fury welled up within James, momentarily eclipsing his fear. Isn't the punishment enough? He spat, his voice laced with defiance. Lemon's smile vanished, replaced by a grimace that contorted his features. Enough? He roared, his voice thick with venom. That punishment was nothing. You humiliated me, nerd. Now I want to make you pay for real. Before James could react, Lemon lunged, throwing a wild punch that grazed James' cheek. The other two bullies joined the fray, raining down blows from all sides. James, despite his month of karate training, was woefully outmatched. His punches and kicks, honed against a heavy bag, lacked the power and ferocity needed to counter their brutal assault. He blocked what he could, the pain of each blow registering as a dull ache that spread through his body. The ground seemed to come up and meet him with a sickening thud as one of Lemon's cronies swept his legs from under him. James landed hard, the breath knocked out of his lungs. He tasted blood metallic in his mouth, a testament to a split lip. Panic clawed at him as he scrambled to his feet, only to be met with a vicious kick to his stomach that doubled him over. The world spun, his vision blurring at the edges. He was trapped, a defenseless prey surrounded by a pack of ravenous wolves. Rain lashed against James' face as they shoved him down a narrow alleyway, the uneven cobblestones scraping his skin with each stumble. Fear, cold and primal, coiled in his gut. The bravado he'd shown earlier was a distant memory, replaced by the desperate need to escape. But escape proved impossible. The bullies, emboldened by their overwhelming advantage, cornered him against a brick wall. James, his breath coming in ragged gasps, braced himself for the onslaught. Punches rained down on him like hailstones, leaving bruises blooming across his exposed skin. He tried to fight back, swinging his fists with all his might, but his blows lacked the force to land any real damage. The bullies seemed to revel in his pain, their laughter echoing off the damp brick walls. One of them, a wiry boy with a cruel glint in his eyes, landed a particularly vicious blow to James' stomach, doubling him over with a pain gasp. Tears welled up in James' eyes, blurring his vision. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, threatening to send him sprawling to the ground. But he forced himself to stay upright, fueled by a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would hear their commotion and come to his aid. Suddenly, the world tilted. A sickening crack echoed through the alley as Lemon connected with James' head, wielding a metal rod he'd snatched from a nearby garbage can. The pain exploded in a white-hot wave, stealing James' breath and sending him crumpling to the ground. He lay there, his body a broken puppet, the air knocked from his lungs. A choked sob escaped his lips as a wave of nausea washed over him. Through the haze of pain, James saw Lemon looming over him, the metal rod glinting menacingly in the dim light. A chilling realization dawned on him. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about dominance, about crushing the defiance he dared to show. In that moment, James knew he was in serious danger. Panic surged through the narrow alley. Their reign, a relentless drumbeat moments ago, seemed to hold its breath. James lay motionless, a broken figure crumpled against the cold brick. One of the bullies, a scrawny boy named Mark, his face pale, stammered, "Lemon. You think you killed him?" The metal rod clattered to the ground as Lemon, The bravado drained from his face, stared at James with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He knelt beside James, his hand hovering hesitantly over his chest. "Crap," he muttered, the word thick with dawning realization. I went too far." Another bully, a hulking brute named Tony, knelt beside James, his fingers fumbling for a pulse. The seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity. Finally, Tony shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "He's cold." No pulse. Terror, raw and primal, gripped them. They had come here to settle a score, not become murderers. The alley, once a haven for their bullying, now felt like a tomb. Their reign, resuming its relentless rhythm, seemed to mock their fear. "We got to get out of here," hissed Mark, his voice trembling. "There's no camera, right?" They all scanned the alley, their eyes darting nervously. Relief washed over them when they confirmed the absence of any CCTV. "No cameras," Tony confirmed, his voice tight. "Let's go," Lemon rasped, his bravado shattered. "We can't stay here." They fled the alley like rats from a sinking ship, the rain washing away their footprints, but not their guilt. James, unconscious and alone, lay under the cold gaze of the street lamp, the rain a chilling counterpoint to the warmth that had seeped from his body. The rain continued its mournful symphony as a lone figure emerged from the shadows, drawn by an unsettling stillness in the air. It was a man, shrouded in a long trench coat, his face obscured by the brim of a fedora. He navigated the slick cobblestones with practiced ease, his gaze falling upon James' crumpled form. A low whistle escaped the man's lips as he surveyed the scene. He crouched beside James, his gloved fingers brushing against the boy's cold cheek. A cynical chuckle rumbled from his chest. "Looks like you bit off more than you could chew, kid," he muttered, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Always remember, there are some guys you just can't afford to tangle with." His words held a chilling truth, a stark reminder of the power dynamic that had led James to this lifeless state. Yet, a flicker of something else flickered in the man's eyes, a hint of amusement, perhaps even morbid satisfaction. He reached into the depths of his coat, his hand emerging with a small vial filled with a glowing blue liquid. The man uncorked it with a practiced flick, his lips curling into a sly smile. "But hey," he said, his voice laced with a hint of dark humor, "sometimes even reckless actions can be beneficial." Without hesitation, he tipped the vial towards James' mouth, forcing a few drops of the mysterious liquid down his throat. The man watched with morbid curiosity as the blue liquid pulsed through James' veins, a faint blue luminescence spreading across his skin for a fleeting moment before vanishing. Then, a miracle or perhaps a twisted scientific anomaly, James' chest rose and fell with a shallow breath. A gasp escaped his lips, his eyes fluttering open to reveal confusion and pain. "Welcome back to the land of the living, my little walking dead," the man rasped, a hint of amusement dancing in his eyes. With that, he slipped back into the shadows, leaving James to grapple with his predicament, alive, but forever marked by the encounter and the enigmatic man who brought him back. The alley remained shrouded in an unsettling silence after the mysterious man's departure. Rain continued its relentless drumming, washing away any trace of his presence except for the faint, lingering scent of chemicals. James, still unconscious, lay sprawled on the cold cobblestones. Then, a tremor ran through his body, barely perceptible at first. It grew into a violent shudder, his limbs contorting unnaturally. A horrifying symphony of cracking bones and tearing flesh filled the air, a grotesque metamorphosis unseen by any human eye. It was as if his very being was being rewritten on a cellular level. Blood pulsed through his veins, glowing a faint blue for a fleeting moment before returning to its normal hue. The transformation, swift and brutal, swept through James, leaving behind a chilling stillness. When James finally stirred, a terrifying transformation had taken place, yet on the surface, nothing seemed different. His clothes remained the same, clinging limply to his seemingly unchanged body. But as he slowly opened his eyes, a single, horrifying detail shattered the illusion of normalcy. They were no longer the warm brown of his past, but a startling crimson, devoid of iris or pupil, hollow like a fish's. James found himself jolting awake, the sheets tangled around him. Sweat clung to his skin, a cold clammy sensation despite the warm night air. He sat up, chest heaving, his gaze falling on his trembling hands. The events of the alleyway played out in his mind as the brutal beating, the chilling indifference of Lemon and his gang, the rain washing over him. It felt so real, so immediate. But was it? He snatched his phone from the nightstand, squinting at the date displayed on the screen. It was the same date as the attack, a date forever etched in his memory. Confusion washed over him. Was it all just a horrific nightmare? Yet, the memory of returning home, of getting into bed that was a complete blank. The thought of his mother, of seeking comfort in her arms, flickered in his mind. But a wave of apprehension stopped him. How could he explain his injuries? How could he explain the last night, the gaping hole in his memory? He needed to understand what happened first, to piece together the missing fragments of his night. A strange sensation prickled at James' fingertips as he touched his head, no lingering ache or tenderness from the beating. It was as if his body had somehow repaired itself overnight, the memory of the attack the only evidence of its reality. Confused and disoriented, he glanced around his room, the familiar surroundings offering little solace. The worn wallpaper with its faded superhero posters, the overflowing bookshelf crammed with fantasy novels, these were the comforting constants of his life, yet they felt strangely distant now. His gaze then landed on something even more baffling, a faint, glowing screen hovering in the air a few feet in front of him. It resembled a heads-up display from a video game, its translucent blue light casting an otherworldly glow on his worn desk and rumpled bedsheets. Blinking rapidly, James rubbed his eyes, unsure if he was still hallucinating from the shock. When he opened them again, the screen remained, displaying a message in crisp, blue letters. Mission 1, complete 10 push-ups. Your STR will increase by 0.1. A jolt of adrenaline shot through him. Was this some elaborate prank? A technological glitch from a new VR game he hadn't gotten around to installing? Or something more? Hesitantly, he reached out a finger, the blue light shimmering slightly as it passed through his hand. It felt real, not a holographic projection. With a mix of apprehension and a strange sense of exhilaration, James decided to play along. He lowered himself into a push-up position, his heart pounding in his chest. As he began the exercise, a warmth spread through his muscles, a subtle tingle that felt unlike anything he'd experienced before. Was this the system enhancing his strength in real time? Dropping down slowly, he completed 10 controlled push-ups, focusing on the burn in his muscles. As he finished the last one, a wave of satisfaction washed over him, a subtle sense of improvement in his physical form. Then, with a satisfying chime, the screen updated. Congratulations. Mission complete. Your STR increased by plus 0.1. James stared at the message, his mind reeling. STRA, that stood for strength, a stat commonly found in video games. Could this be some kind of augmented reality system? Was he in a simulation? A million questions flooded his mind. But one thing was certain, his life had taken an extraordinary turn. A wave of astonishment washed over James. The holographic screen pulsed once more, transforming into a more elaborate window showcasing his statistics. Player name: James Khan. STR 7.1, 0.1 up. Con 12, Dex 6, INT 3, Wis 3, CHA-10. A wave of bewilderment washed over James. The holographic screen flickered once more, revealing a new window that unfolded before him like a digital scroll. It displayed a list of statistics under the bold heading Player Name, James Khan. Numbers followed each category, mirroring the ones he'd seen on the screen before the push-up mission. ASTR, Con, Dex, INT, Wis, and CHA. System message: here's a breakdown of the stats and their meaning. STR, this represents strength, a measure of James' physical power and endurance. Con, this stands for constitution, which reflects James' overall health and stamina. His high con might explain why he has no lingering pain despite the beating. Dex, dexterity indicates James' agility, reflexes, and coordination. INT, this represents intelligence, a measure of James' cognitive abilities, problem-solving skills, and knowledge. Wis, this stands for wisdom, which reflects James' perception, intuition, and ability to make sound judgments. This represents charisma, a measure of James' persuasiveness, social influence, and attractiveness. This sudden revelation sent James' mind racing. Where did these stats come from? Was this a video game somehow integrated into real life? Or was it something more, a broken bar? He tentatively reached out a finger, the screen shimmering slightly at his touch. Each stat seemed to hold a hidden potential, a path to improvement. Suddenly, a new line of text materialized at the bottom of the window. New mission available. Intrigued, James tapped the message, and a new holographic window materialized, outlining the details of the next mission. A shiver ran down James' spine as a new window materialized before him, emblazoned with the unsettling title, Bully System. A cold dread settled in his stomach. Was this system somehow connected to the night he was attacked? His gaze flitted down to the details of the next mission. Mission 2, strengthen your grip with stress ball, 1000 squeezes. Reward, skill, thunderclap, slap. James' initial fear gave way to a strange mix of apprehension and curiosity. 1000 squeezes with a stress ball? It seemed mundane, almost comical, compared to the brutality he'd endured. Yet, the reward, a skill called thunderclap, slap, piqued his interest. Could this be the key to defending himself in the future? A surge of determination coursed through James. The memory of the alleyway attack flickered in his mind, fueling a burning desire to be stronger, to never feel so helpless again. The bully system felt like a twisted path, but the reward, the thunderclap, slap, offered a glimmer of hope. He needed to find a way to complete the mission. Then, a memory surfaced of his older sister, Lily. She always had a bright yellow stress ball tucked away in her backpack, fidgeting with it during tests or tense moments. Maybe, just maybe, that could be his ticket. However, James knew Lily like the back of his hand. She was fiercely possessive of her belongings, rarely sharing them with anyone, not even their parents. Asking for the stress ball, especially for this strange mission, would be an uphill battle. A wave of relief washed over James. A quick glance around his room revealed no sign of Lily. His heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and excitement. This was his chance. He tiptoed out of his room, his mind racing. Was Lily in the dining room, munching on leftover cookies? Or perhaps sprawled on the couch in the drawing room, lost in a movie? He didn't waste time pondering her whereabouts. He had a mission to complete, and the thought of reliving the helplessness of the alleyway spurred him on. He crept down the hallway, his senses on high alert. Reaching Lily's room, he paused for a beat, taking a deep breath. This was it. He peeked inside. The room was a mess, a testament to his sister's usual disarray. Clothes were strewn across the floor, books lay open on her desk, and posters adorned the walls. A backpack sat slumped on a chair, its contents spilling out like a treasure trove. And there, nestled amidst notebooks and crumpled papers, was the prize he sought, the bright yellow stress ball. James' conscience twinged. Stealing from his sister, even something as seemingly insignificant as a stress ball, went against his nature. But the memory of Lemon's cruel laughter and the sting of blows flashed in his mind, erasing his hesitation. He reached for the stress ball, his fingers brushing against a worn teddy bear, a reminder of their childhood. A pang of guilt stabbed at him, but he steeled himself. He'd make it up to Lily later. Now, he had a mission to complete. With a silent apology to his absent sister, James snagged the stress ball and beat a hasty retreat. He navigated the hallway, his heart hammering in his chest. Reaching the safety of his own room, he bolted the door shut, collapsing onto his bed. Relief flooded him, mixed with a surge of nervous anticipation. He held the stress ball in his hand, a simple object that now seemed to hold the power to change his future. James gripped the stress ball, its bright yellow surface cool against his clammy palm. With a deep breath, he began to squeeze. The first few compressions were easy, a satisfying resistance pushing back against his fingers. But as the numbers on the counter ticked by 100, 200, 300, his hand began to protest. Muscles in his forearm burned, and his fingers felt cramped. He hadn't considered this. Building strength wouldn't be effortless. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, and a tremor ran through his hand with each squeeze. Stubbornly, he continued, picturing Lemon's sneering face with each squeeze. It was a mental image that fueled his determination. Every time his grip faltered, he visualized the alleyway, the rain stinging his face, the sickening thud of his body hitting the ground. Shame and anger pulsed through him, a potent cocktail that pushed him to squeeze harder. By 546, his hand was a throbbing mess. Ignoring the burning ache that radiated from his fingertips to his elbow, he forced himself to one more squeeze before finally relenting with a groan. He let the stress ball fall limply into his lap, his hand trembling uncontrollably. Yet, a grudging sense of satisfaction bloomed in his chest. He had pushed himself, and the counter reflected his progress. Even with the break, he was halfway there. He slumped back, panting, and stared at the holographic screen hovering in front of him. It displayed his progress. Mission 2, strengthen your grip with stress ball, 546 1,000th squeezes. Reward, skill, thunderclap, slap. Relief washed over him. Apparently, taking breaks was allowed. A wave of exhaustion washed over James. His hand, a dull throb radiating from every overworked muscle, felt like it belonged to someone else. But a triumphant grin stretched across his face. He had done it. Gritting his teeth through fatigue and discomfort, he had squeezed the stress ball 1,000 times. The holographic screen pulsed in acknowledgement, and a message materialized in its familiar blue glow. Congratulations. Mission complete. A surge of satisfaction washed over him. He had taken a step, however small, towards becoming stronger. The screen then flickered, revealing a new window titled, Thunderclap Slap FEXP 0100. This was the reward. The mysterious skill he had been working towards. Thunderclap Slap sounded impressive, but the F after it likely indicated a beginner's level. The EXP 0100 suggested there was room for improvement, a way to level up this skill. Intrigue battled with exhaustion in James' mind. What exactly was Thunderclap Slap? How did it work? A million questions swirled in his head, but his eyelids felt heavy, his body yearning for rest. He decided to save his exploration for later. With a final squeeze of the now limp stress ball, more out of habit than necessity, James put it onto his desk drawer and collapsed onto his bed, the holographic screen fading as he drifted off to sleep. The scent of bacon and eggs wafted through the air, a familiar and comforting aroma that usually coaxed James downstairs with a rumbling stomach. This morning, however, his steps were slow and hesitant. His hand, though still throbbing faintly, felt a world better after a night's rest. He approached the breakfast table, where his mother sat, a worried crease etched between her brows as she sipped her coffee. Her usually vibrant eyes were clouded with concern, and a stray strand of hair had escaped her braid, a sign of her earlier distress. "James, honey," she said, her voice laced with concern, "you looked awful yesterday. Are you feeling better?" James forced a smile, the memory of the alleyway attack churning in his stomach. "Just a little under the weather, Mom," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. His mother didn't seem entirely convinced. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe, searching for any hidden injuries or signs of illness beyond the paleness that seemed to have settled permanently on his face. He knew she wouldn't pry. James had always been a good kid, more interested in getting lost in the fantastical worlds of his books than the brutal realities of the schoolyard. He wasn't the type to skip class or hang out with rowdy troublemakers. Getting into fights, especially one that left him so visibly shaken, felt like such a cruel anomaly in his otherwise predictable life. It was a jarring departure from the gentle, polite boy she knew and raised, a son who wouldn't dream of disrespecting a teacher or talking back to an adult. The sudden shift in his demeanor, the guarded look in his eyes, gnawed at her. Yet, she also knew that pushing him wouldn't elicit the truth. James had always been fiercely independent, bottling up his emotions rather than seeking comfort. Perhaps, she thought, with a pang of helplessness, this was just a phase, a surge of teenage angst that would pass with time. But the worry lingered, a knot of unease tightening in her gut. "Well, don't hesitate to tell me if you need anything at all right?" his mother said, her tone softening. She placed a plate piled high with scrambled eggs and toast in front of him. "Eat up, You look like you could use some fuel." James nodded, grateful for his mother's concern. He forced himself to take a bite, the food tasting bland and unappetizing. His mind was preoccupied with the events of the previous night, the mysterious system, the brutal beating, and the strange new skill called thunderclap slap. The familiar halls of James' school felt suffocating this morning. Every corner held the potential for a hidden threat, every face a mask concealing a possible bully. He considered skipping school altogether, seeking refuge in the quiet solitude of his room. But a stubborn glint entered his eyes. Skipping wouldn't solve anything. In fact, it would only fuel his fear and hinder his progress. Taking a deep breath, he squared his shoulders and pushed open the classroom door. His gaze swept the room, searching for his friend Emdad's familiar face. A knot of worry tightened in his stomach when he saw the empty desk. Emdad's absence wasn't unusual. He was known for the occasional tardiness or unplanned day off. But given the events of the previous night, a cold dread washed over James. Had Emdad been targeted too? Were they both victims of the same group of bullies, the ones Lemon led? The thought sent a tremor of anger through him. He wouldn't stand by and watch Emdad get bullied. But what could he do? He was still weak, his hand throbbing, a dull reminder of his limitations. Yet, the prospect of facing the bullies again, armed with a mysterious system, sent a spark of defiance through him. Perhaps the system wasn't so bad after all. It offered him a chance to fight back, to protect himself and his friend. The school day crawled by for James. His mind was a whirlwind of worry for Emdad's absence and the cryptic bully system. Finally, the shrill ring of the lunch bell pierced the monotony, sending a surge of relief through him. He needed a break, a chance to clear his head and consider his next move. As James navigated the crowded hallway towards the canteen, a commotion drew his attention. A throng of students had gathered, their faces alight with a mixture of amusement and unease. With a sigh of annoyance, James pushed through the crowd, his stomach growling in protest. He needed to reach the canteen, grab some lunch, and get some peace. Emerging into the center of the crowd, James found himself face to face with a scene straight out of an awkward teen drama. A girl, Millie from his own 9A class, stood at the center of the attention. Her expression was a mix of annoyance and apprehension. Opposite her stood a boy, clearly from the upperclassman, a 9B student judging by his uniform tag. He was slightly taller frame and handsome. His features were contorted in a persistent grin, revealing a desperate attempt at charm which was falling flat in James' eyes. "Come on, Millie," the boy pleaded, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "Just give me your number. We could grab coffee sometime." Millie, ever the straight shooter, crossed her arms and shook her head firmly. "No thanks, Ryan. I'm not interested." The boy's smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He quickly recovered, though, and tried another tack. "Maybe you're worried you'll have to compete with all my fangirls?" "Don't worry, you'll be my number one," he added with a wink that James found more creepy than charming. Millie rolled her eyes, her patience wearing thin. James recognized the signs she was about to unleash a verbal smackdown of epic proportions, something that would leave the boy wishing he'd never spoken to her. But before she could launch into her tirade, a new voice cut through the tension. "Leave her alone, Ryan," James said, stepping forward. His voice, though a little shaky, held a newfound firmness. James' heart hammered in his chest, a counterpoint to the nervous tremor in his hand. He didn't step forward out of some noble desire to be a hero. The memory of the beating in the alleyway was still fresh, and getting tangled in another fight was the last thing he wanted. However, the tension was thick, and James knew an intervention, however small, might be enough to defuse the situation. Using the thunderclap slap outside of self-defense felt wrong. But maybe this is the situation. He can use it as the context of self-defense. "Leave her alone," James repeated, his voice firm despite the internal turmoil. Ryan, caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events, turned his attention to James. A sneer played across his lips. "Who are you, her knight in shining armor?" he scoffed. "Seems like someone's got a crush there. Too shy to confess." James gritted his teeth. The last thing he needed was to be dragged into a fight over a misunderstanding. "We're in the same class," he clarified, trying to keep his voice level, and you're causing a scene. Just give up now." Ryan's face flushed with anger. Maybe it was the way James spoke, a quiet confidence that belied his slight frame, or perhaps it was the sheer audacity of a foreign classmate challenging him. Whatever the reason, Ryan bristled. "Give up? This doesn't concern you, pipsqueak. Go back to playing with your Legos." The insult stung. James clenched his fists, the memory of the stress ball fueling a surge of defiance. But was this the right time to use it? A part of him wanted to unleash the thunderclap slap right there, to wipe that smug smirk off Ryan's face. Well, he wants to test it badly, that's why he stepped up unconsciously. But another, more cautious voice held him back. Using the skill in the hallway, in front of everyone, could lead to unwanted attention and questions. "Legos?" James echoed, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. "Maybe you should stick to building your reputation on something other than harassing girls in the hallway." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "What did you say, shrimp?" he growled, taking a menacing step forward. James stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I said, back off. You're making a fool of yourself." A tense silence descended upon the hallway. The crowd, initially amused by the spectacle, now watched with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Millie, who had been speechless throughout the exchange, finally found her voice. "That's enough, both of you," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Ryan, I already told you number. Please, just leave me alone." The air crackled with unspoken threats. James and Ryan stood locked in a silent battle, eyes narrowed, muscles tensed. Millie's plea hung in the air, momentarily forgotten. The crowd held its breath, a collective gasp threatening to erupt at any moment. James, his hand instinctively clenching into a fist, felt the phantom ache of his overworked muscles. The memory of the stress ball and his incomplete thunderclap slap skill flickered in mind. Was he ready to use it? The consequences of unleashing an unknown power in the crowded hallway were a daunting prospect. Ryan, emboldened by James' lack of immediate aggression, puffed out his chest. "You gonna do something about it, pipsqueak?" he taunted, a cruel glint in his eyes. James gritted his teeth, a surge of anger battling with a newfound caution. He couldn't back down, not after challenging Ryan. Yet, the prospect of a fight, especially one where the rules were unclear, sent a shiver down his spine. In a scene straight out of a dramatic Western movie, James and Ryan locked eyes, their gazes locked in a silent, intense duel. The tension in the hallway was so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. The tension crackled louder than the excited whispers of the student body. As James and Ryan stood face to face, a low murmur rippled through the crowd, punctuated by bursts of nervous energy. "Whoa, looks like things are gonna get heated," chirped Sarah, a girl from James' class, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Yeah, no way that shrimp can take on Ryan," scoffed John, a notorious bully from 9B, leaning back with a smirk. "Ryan placed 6th in the National Judo U19 this year." "Seriously?" Sarah gasped, a tinge of worry creeping into her voice. But James looked pretty determined. "Determination won't win against judo throws," scoffed John, enjoying his moment of dominance in the knowledge gap. Ryan could have James on the ground in seconds. Across the hallway, a group of girls from Millie's class huddled together, their faces etched with concern. "Millie doesn't deserve this," whispered Maya, her brow furrowed. "That Ryan guy is such a jerk." "Do you think James will step in?" asked Nadia, biting her lip nervously. "He seems brave," chimed in Annika, "but Ryan is just bigger." A tall, lanky boy with glasses, known as Specs for his studious nature, chimed in from the fringes of the crowd. "Don't underestimate the underdog," he said quietly, his voice laced with a hint of wisdom. "Sometimes, a well-placed punch can surprise even the best-trained fighter." The buzzing commentary of the crowd faded into a distant hum as a new window materialized before James. This wasn't the familiar blue screen of the bully system, but a stark red one, pulsing with an ominous urgency. Blazoned across it in bold white letters was the message: Mission 3, slap Ryan with thunderclap slap skill, 02. Reward, +2 CHA. Below it, a chilling reminder: if you don't complete it, there will be a penalty. Struck by thunder, a heavy sigh escaped James' lips. The weight of the situation settled on him like a leaden cloak. Free will versus a system-imposed mission. The choice, it seemed, wasn't truly his. He couldn't risk being struck by thunder in the middle of the hallway. With a resigned nod, he accepted the mission. The red window vanished, replaced by the familiar blue screen. The air crackled with anticipation as Ryan lunged forward, his years of judo training evident in the swift, fluid movement. He aimed for a textbook throw, a hip throw designed to send James sprawling onto the hard floor of the hallway. But James surprised everyone, including himself. A surge of adrenaline fueled his reflexes, and with a practiced movement honed in hours of secret training, he countered Ryan's attack. His arm rose in a sharp block, deflecting Ryan's momentum. A gasp rippled through the crowd. No one knew James knew karate. "Whoa. Did you see that?" someone whispered. "Since when is James a martial artist?" Another chimed in, disbelief coloring their voice. Empowered by this unexpected advantage, James pressed his attack. He launched into a series of precise kicks and punches, his movements a blur of focused energy. The crowd, initially stunned, erupted in a cacophony of cheers and jeers. However, despite the initial success, James' lack of experience quickly became apparent. Ryan, a seasoned competitor, recovered quickly from James' initial flurry. He used his superior strength and judo expertise to his advantage, expertly maneuvering James off balance. A well-placed sweep sent James sprawling to the ground. The wind knocked out of his lungs. A groan escaped his lips as Ryan loomed over him, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. "Looks like the pipsqueak doesn't have what it takes after all," Ryan taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. James gritted his teeth, the sting of defeat mingling with the dull ache in his back. He knew he couldn't give up. The mission loomed large, a constant reminder pushing him to his feet. He needed to use the thunderclap slap. It was his only chance. The air stung with a metallic tang of sweat and tension. James scrambled to his feet, his vision momentarily blurred from the impact. Ryan, emboldened by his dominance, circled him like a predator stalking its prey. "Give it up, pipsqueak," Ryan sneered, his voice laced with a cruel amusement. "You're outmatched." James ignored him, focusing on the burning ache in his side and the throbbing in his head. He knew Ryan was right. He was losing. This wasn't a sparring session, and James lacked the experience to counter Ryan's aggression and well-honed technique. The taunts of the crowd, initially a source of unexpected energy, now seemed distant and mocking. But amidst the pain and humiliation, a flicker of defiance sparked in James' eyes. He couldn't let Ryan win. He wouldn't let himself be bullied anymore. More importantly, the chilling reminder of the struck by thunder penalty flashed in his mind. With a renewed surge of determination, James took a deep breath and adopted a more defensive stance. He remembered his karate training, the hours spent perfecting blocks and counters under the watchful eye of his sensei. He wouldn't give Ryan an easy shot. The fight continued, a brutal dance of kicks and punches. James, fueled by desperation and the system's invisible leash, fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself. He blocked a barrage of blows, narrowly dodging a kick aimed at his head. However, exhaustion gnawed at him, his movements becoming slower and more sluggish. James' vision swam, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Every muscle screamed in protest, his body a canvas of pain. A triumphant smirk spread across Ryan's face as he prepared to deliver a finishing blow. Just as Ryan's fist arced through the air, a crucial mistake. He let his guard down for a split second, a sliver of arrogance clouding his judgment. James, fueled by a primal instinct for survival and the ever-present threat of the struck by thunder penalty, saw his chance. With a surge of adrenaline that defied his exhaustion, James launched himself forward. Ignoring the proper karate form drilled into him for years, he focused on one thing: delivering the slap. He closed the distance between him and Ryan in a blink, his arm extended, palm open. The crowd held its breath, a collective gasp escaping their lips as James connected with a resounding smack. It wasn't a precise, controlled strike, but it landed squarely on Ryan's cheek. The effect was immediate and shocking. Ryan's eyes widened in surprise, his smug grin replaced by a look of pure terror. A thunderous crack echoed through the hallway, seemingly emanating from the point of contact between James' hand and Ryan's face. Ryan's body convulsed, a jolt of unseen energy coursing through him. He stumbled back, clutching his face, his bravado replaced by a whimper of pain. The world seemed to stand still for a moment. The students gaped in stunned silence, the weight of the unnatural phenomenon hanging heavy in the air. James, his hand throbbing with a strange tingling sensation, stared at Ryan, a mixture of disbelief. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over James. Relief flooded him. He'd completed one part of the mission, the ever-present threat of being struck by thunder receding for the moment. But it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of concern as he witnessed the aftermath of his actions. Ryan, crumpled against the lockers, whimpered, his face contorted in a mask of pain and confusion. There were no visible marks on his cheek, but the way his body convulsed with each whimper spoke volumes about the power coursing through him. A new line flickered on the blue screen hovering in James' vision. Mission 3, slap Ryan with thunderclap slap skill, 1/2. Reward, +2 CHA. The single completed slap mocked him, a constant reminder that the ordeal wasn't over. Hesitation gnawed at him. Seeing Ryan in such a vulnerable state, a sliver of doubt crept in. Was another slap truly necessary? James wasn't used to fighting in real life, so he was still somewhat hesitating about the whole thing happening. But the chilling message about the penalty echoed in his mind, and the invisible hand of the bully system seemed to tighten its grip. With a heavy sigh, James steeled himself. He couldn't risk the consequences of disobedience. Squaring his shoulders, he approached the whimpering Ryan, a strange mix of guilt and determination warring within him. Ignoring the shocked gasps from the crowd, James raised his hand once more. This time, fueled by a pragmatic desire to complete the mission rather than any animosity towards Ryan, he delivered a swift, open-handed strike to the other side of Ryan's face. It wasn't a powerful blow, more akin to a boxing jab than a forceful slap. The effect, however, was just as dramatic. Ryan let out a startled yelp, his body convulsing as if struck by an unseen force. There were no visible marks, but the bewildered look on his face spoke volumes. This wasn't a punch, it wasn't pain in the traditional sense. It was something strange, unnerving, and unlike anything he'd ever experienced. A wave of dizziness washed over James as he lowered his hand. The air crackled with a strange energy, a final echo of the bizarre power he'd unleashed. The hallway remained silent, the students frozen in stunned disbelief. Ryan, still whimpering, clutched his cheeks, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Suddenly, a familiar blue screen materialized before James. A triumphant fanfare blared, a stark contrast to the tense silence that hung heavy in the air. Congratulations. Mission complete. Reward, +2 CHA. Current CHA, 12. James stared at the screen, a hollow feeling settling in his stomach. The meager reward, a 2-point increase in his CHA stat, felt insignificant compared to the chaos he'd unleashed. He glanced at Ryan, who was slowly pulling himself up, his bravado shattered. What had he gotten himself into? Just as abruptly as it appeared, the screen vanished. In its place, a new urgency filled the air. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. What's all this commotion? A booming voice cut through the tense silence. The students, as if startled awake from a dream, scattered like startled birds. James, his heart pounding in his chest, turned to see Principal Beist, his stern face etched with concern, striding towards them. Principal Beist, a stern man with a bushy mustache that seemed to permanently furrow his brow, ushered James, Ryan, and Millie into his office. The tension in the room was thicker than the stale air. Beist, ever the stickler for following protocol, started with Millie. "All right, Millie," he began, his voice gruff but fair. "Tell me what happened out there in the hallway." Millie, relieved to finally have a voice, explained the situation clearly. "Ryan approached me, asking for my number. I politely declined, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. James here just happened to walk by and saw the whole thing." Her voice hitched slightly. "He didn't have to step in, but he did." Beist's gaze flickered to James, a hint of curiosity replacing his initial disapproval. James met his gaze, his posture resolute despite the knot of worry in his stomach. "That's right, Principal biased, James confirmed, his voice firm. I saw Ryan harassing Millie and thought I should intervene. Ryan, clutching his still tingling cheeks, scoffed. Harassing? Come on, she's overreacting. I was just trying to be friendly. His bravado, however, lacked its earlier conviction. Millie bristled. No, Ryan, you were making me uncomfortable. James had nothing to do with me. He just saw someone being bullied and decided to do something about it. It's not like I called him or anything. It would have been great if he minded his own business. Biased steepled his fingers, his eyes narrowed in thought. The situation presented a challenge. On one hand, James' actions, while seemingly well-intentioned, had disrupted the school environment and potentially resulted in some kind of strange phenomenon with Ryan's odd reaction to the slaps. On the other hand, Biased couldn't condone Ryan's behavior towards Millie. This is a serious matter, Biased finally spoke, his voice heavy. Ryan, your actions were inappropriate. We have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying in this school. As for James. He paused, his gaze lingering on James for a long moment. James, while I appreciate you stepping in to help a classmate, violence is never the answer. However, I will need to further investigate the unusual events that transpired. Biased leaned back in his chair, a sigh escaping his lips. He knew this wouldn't be a simple case of a hallway scuffle. There was something more at play, something he couldn't quite grasp. He needed to find a way to handle the situation that addressed all aspects. Ryan's behavior, James' involvement. Principal Biased steepled his fingers once more, his gaze flickering between James, Ryan, and Millie. A sigh escaped his lips. Look, he began, his voice gruff but laced with a hint of weariness. James' grandfather, Harold, and I go way back. We were practically inseparable in our youth. He was like my elder brother figure to me. I respected that man more than anyone, and frankly, I still do. He paused, his eyes meeting James for a fleeting moment. A silent message seemed to pass between them, a respect for the past influencing the present. Because of that history, Biased continued, his voice regaining its authoritative tone, I'm willing to let this go. Slightly. However, let me be clear, your actions were unacceptable. He looked pointedly at both James and Ryan. Ryan, your behavior towards Millie was inappropriate and disrespectful. We have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying in this school, and you will face consequences. Ryan shifted uncomfortably under Biased's gaze. The bravado he displayed earlier had completely evaporated. Biased then turned to James. And James, while I appreciate your desire to help, resorting to violence is never the answer. There are better ways to handle a situation like this. James met Biased's gaze with a mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that the situation wasn't escalating further, a reprieve from the potential storm brewing within him ever since the mission notification popped up. Disappointment, however, gnawed at him. He'd intervened, put himself at risk, used this strange power the system had thrust upon him, all to help someone in need. Yet, here he was, being reprimanded for it. It felt unfair, a discouragement from doing the right thing. But a sliver of understanding flickered amidst the disappointment. Principal Biased was right. Violence, even a bizarre, non-injurious slap, wasn't the answer. There had to be a better way, a way the system hadn't equipped him with yet. That said, Biased continued, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. Considering the circumstances, he trailed off, letting the tension build for a moment before delivering his verdict. Both of you will be responsible for cleaning the overgrown patch of weeds behind the school until it's completely cleared. Every day after school, until the job is done. Ryan's jaw dropped. Clean weeds? Every day? Why? He sputtered, indignation coloring his voice. Biased's eyes narrowed, unleashing a death glare that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. It was a look that held the weight of years as an educator, a lifetime of experience dealing with students who tested boundaries and pushed limits. It was a look that had quelled countless teenage rebellions and diffused volatile situations. In that moment, Ryan saw Principal Biased not as the slightly goofy administrator he usually dismissed, but as a man of formidable presence and unwavering authority. The playful banter and easy demeanor Ryan was accustomed to vanished, replaced by an icy resolve that brooked no argument. Because I said so, Mr. Ahmed, Biased replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Consider it manual labor therapy to reflect on your actions." Ryan, suddenly subdued, mumbled a begrudging, "Yes, Principal Biased." Biased then dismissed Millie and Ryan with a curt nod. "You two are free to go. But remember, this isn't over. We'll be having a follow-up conversation about your behavior, Ryan." Once they were gone, Biased gestured for James to stay behind. A different kind of look settled on his face, one filled with curiosity and a hint of concern. Principal Biased chuckled, a deep rumble that contrasted with his usual stern demeanor. "Don't worry, James," he said, a hint of amusement twinkling in his eyes. "I understand your frustration. Trust me, I gave Ryan a good tongue lashing too. But you have to understand, letting you two walk away scot-free after a brawl in the hallway would cause quite a stir." James offered a hesitant smile. The reprimand still stung, but the revelation about his grandfather and Principal Biased shifted his perspective. Biased leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers once more. "Honestly," he continued, a nostalgic glint in his eyes, "if this had happened outside of school grounds, I probably wouldn't have interfered. Kids gotta learn to settle their disagreements sometimes, right?" James' eyebrows shot up. This was a completely different side of Principal Biased than he'd ever seen. Gone was the stoic authority figure, replaced by a man with a mischievous twinkle and a surprising past. "You see," Biased said, a smile stretching across his face, "your grandfather, Harold, wasn't just my squadron leader during the Liberation War in '71. We were also a broken bar." He paused, a playful glint in his eyes, partners in a bit of youthful mischief. James' jaw dropped. His mild-mannered, bookish grandfather a gang leader? The image was completely incongruous. "Yep," Biased chuckled, enjoying James' flabbergasted expression. "Harold, the legendary Hurricane Harold, terror of the Dhaka streets." Though back then, it was more pranks than anything serious. "But let me tell you, the man could throw a mean punch, a broken bar, or should I say, slap." A wave of realization washed over James. Principal Biased, a man he'd always seen as a stern but somewhat goofy administrator, suddenly possessed a fascinating past. The image of his bookish grandfather as a hurricane leading a gang was still settling in, but Biased's story offered a glimpse into the man behind the legend. "Wow," James managed, his voice barely a whisper. "I never knew." Biased's smile softened, a touch of nostalgia coloring his voice. "Harold was 5 years my senior. When he joined the army at 18, he was practically a man already. He possessed a quiet confidence that belied his age. By the time the war broke out, he was a captain, leading his men with courage and a surprising amount of tactical cunning. He had a knack for unconventional strategies, turning seemingly reckless maneuvers into strokes of brilliance that left the enemy bewildered and our forces victorious. They called him Hurricane Harold back then in Army 2, a whirlwind of energy and tactical genius that could shift the tide of a battle. Of course that title was made by me. A glint of pride flickered in Biased's eyes. "He called me up, said they needed all the help they could get." 19 years old, hot-headed and full of bravado, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't just because he was my senior, though he definitely earned our respect back in the day. It was because he believed in what we were fighting for, and that fire in his eyes, it was contagious. Biased's voice softened further, a touch of reverence creeping in. "Harold was a born leader, even back when we were just a bunch of rowdy teenagers causing trouble. But the war changed him. It hardened him, sure, but it also focused that energy, that rebellious spirit, into something, a broken bar, something admirable." He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look settling on his face. "Funny how things turn out, isn't it? We were Biased's boys back then, terrorizing the streets. Now, here I am, a principal, and your grandfather a broken bar. Well, let's just say he found a different kind of leadership role." Biased sighed as he gazing in distant sky. The dismissal bell echoed through the halls, a sweet yet bittersweet escape from Principal Biased's office. James' stomach rumbled loudly, reminding him of the skipped lunch. His head swam with the whirlwind of revelations, Principal Biased's past, his grandfather's secret history, and the bizarre power the system had bestowed upon him. As he entered his classroom, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned towards him, a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect in their gazes. Even Jay here, the notorious bully, seemed to shrink back slightly in his seat. "Dude, that was epic," a voice blurted from the back. It was Mark, a quiet boy in James' class, rarely seen participating in classroom chatter. This sudden outburst was a complete surprise. A girl named Sarah, who usually sat in the front row, approached James, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "I wished someone would do something like that for me whenever I'm stuck in an awkward situation," she admitted, a touch of envy coloring her voice. James blinked, overwhelmed by this sudden wave of attention. He was used to being invisible, an afterthought in the vibrant tapestry of high school life. But now, everyone seemed to be looking at him, their gazes filled with a newfound interest. A thought flickered in his mind. Could it be the bully system? Had the increase in his CHA stat, a stat he barely understood, somehow altered his social standing? He brushed the question aside for the moment. The truth was, he still didn't understand what exactly had happened. Standing up to Ryan had felt right, but the thunderclap slap skill and its bizarre effects left him deeply unsettled. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. James found it difficult to focus on the droning lectures, his mind constantly replaying the events of the day. After school, the weight of the detention settled on him. He trudged to the back of the school, where a neglected patch of overgrown weeds awaited their attention. Ryan, looking equally disgruntled, stood beside him, a scowl etched onto his face. "Ugh, this is so stupid," Ryan grumbled, kicking at a clump of dirt. James ignored him, picking up a discarded garden rake. He wasn't sure what the future held, what other bizarre missions the bully system might throw at him. But for now, he focused on the task at hand. The rhythmic scrape of the rake against the dry earth, a strangely calming sound against the chaos swirling within him. James grunted, the rhythmic scrape of the rake against the dry earth, a monotonous counterpoint to the storm brewing within him. He glanced sideways at Ryan, who was leaning against the school wall, arms crossed and a picture of sullen defiance. "Seriously, dude?" James couldn't hold back any longer. "We're both going to be here for hours at this rate. Just grab a rake and help out," Ryan scoffed. "Why should I? You're the one who started this whole mess." James clenched his jaw. He couldn't deny that. However, the thought of slaving away all afternoon while Ryan stood around doing nothing fueled a surge of irritation. Just as he was about to retort, a familiar blue screen flickered into existence before his eyes. This time, the mission was a broken bar. James stared at the invisible mission notification, the words practically dancing mockingly in front of his eyes. "Mission: get Ryan to weed without fighting." Underneath, in slightly smaller, equally irritating font, "Failure, wild dog chase, success, +2 int." Wild dogs? Seriously? James shuddered. The image of snarling, slobbering canines with glowing red eyes chasing him through the schoolyard was enough to make his palms sweat. He definitely did not want to fail this mission. And +2 int? That sounded pretty good. Maybe enough to finally understand complex and advanced algebra. He dropped his rake with a clatter, the metal hitting the concrete with a loud clang that made Ryan, who was currently perfecting his impression of a statue, jump slightly. James ignored him for a moment, pacing back and forth in the small patch of weedy garden they were assigned to. Weeding without fighting. The mission objective felt like a personal insult. Did the universe really think he was that prone to fisticuffs? Asking Ryan nicely? That was a joke. Asking Ryan nicely was like asking a brick wall for directions. The guy was a certified grade A jerk, marinated in meanness and served with a side of snark. Politeness was clearly not in his vocabulary. James felt a surge of annoyance. This mission was rigged. Then, a tiny spark of an idea flickered in his brain. It was a bit of broken bar sneaky, maybe even a little underhanded. But desperate times called for slightly less than heroic measures, especially when wild dogs were involved. And int points were on the line. James grinned, a mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone like a secret weapon. His thumb hovered over the speed dial. "Principal Beist." Perfect. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Beist here." Principal Beist barked, sounding like he was wrestling a bear and losing. Principal Beist?" "It's James," James said, trying to inject a tone of polite concern into his voice. "James from detention?" "In the garden," There was a pause, punctuated by a faint, distant roar that might have been the aforementioned bear. "Garden? Oh, right, you and a broken bar, Ryan. Problem?" Mr. Beist sounded less like a principal and more like a disgruntled grizzly bear disturbed from hibernation. "Yes, sir, there's a bit of a problem," James said, glancing sideways at Ryan, who was now examining his fingernails with intense focus, pretending to be utterly oblivious to James's phone call. Ryan was a master of passive-aggressive slacking. James decided to lay it on thick, with a generous dollop of dramatic flair. "It's Ryan, sir," James continued, lowering his voice slightly, as if sharing a grave secret. "Has a broken bar. Well, he's not really helping. He's just standing around completely idle. I'm doing all the work, and I'm worried we won't finish in time. It's just a broken bar. Not fair, sir, and I'm trying my best." "But a broken bar," James trailed off, adding a touch of pathetic weariness to his tone, hoping it sounded convincing. He pictured himself as a tragic hero, burdened by Ryan's laziness. Oscar-worthy performance, he thought, if anyone was watching. James hurriedly switched his call-in speaker mode. Silence. A long, pregnant silence that stretched on for a beat, then two, then three. James held his breath, wondering if Principal Beist had hung up, or worse, seen through his flimsy charade. Then, the silence shattered. "Ryan!" Principal Beist bellowed into the phone, his voice suddenly amplified to ear-splitting levels, making James jump and nearly drop his phone. "Is that true?" The roar was so loud, James was pretty sure it could be heard in the next county. Mr. Beist sounded less angry, and more like a volcano about to erupt. Ryan, who had been serenely admiring a particularly interesting dandelion, practically levitated a foot in the air. His eyes widened, snapping towards James with a mixture of shock and anger that was almost comical. He looked like a startled squirrel caught in headlights. "No, no, sir. I was just a broken bar stretching," Ryan stammered, his voice cracking mid-sentence. He scrambled for a rake, grabbing the nearest one like it was a lifeline. Suddenly, Ryan transformed from a statue of indolence into a whirlwind of weeding activity. He attacked the weeds with a vengeance, hacking and slashing at them like they were personal enemies. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his face flushed red with exertion. He was working like a man possessed, a human weeding machine fueled by pure, unadulterated fear of Principal Beist's wrath. It was actually kind of impressive, in a terrifyingly funny way. James watched the frantic weeding frenzy, a slow smile spreading across his face. He realized something profound. Principal Beist, despite his grizzly bear demeanor, was a surprisingly effective motivational tool, even if it required a little broken bar creative storytelling. Just then, a familiar ding sound chimed from his head. Another invisible notification popped up. "Mission complete. Reward, +2 INT. Current INT, 12. He felt a broken bar smarter already. Maybe he could finally understand those hardest equations now, or at least, not burst into tears every time he looked at them. James chuckled quietly, a low, satisfied sound. He glanced at Ryan, who was still furiously weeding, looking like he was trying to dig a tunnel to China with a rake. Mission accomplished. And no wild dogs in sight. All it took was a little acting skill and the strategic deployment of Principal Beist's vocal cords. Sometimes, James thought, being a bit sneaky was actually a broken bar kind of smart. The last rays of the setting sun cast long shadows as James and Ryan finally finished clearing a sizable portion of the overgrown patch. Ryan, drenched in sweat and surprisingly enthusiastic, thanks to the phantom threat of Principal Beist's wrath, finally tossed his rake down with a grunt of exhaustion. "All right, I've done my time," Ryan mumbled, wiping his brow with a grimy t-shirt sleeve. He turned to leave without a word, a hint of grudging respect flickering in his eyes. James watched him go, a wave of relief washing over him. Not only had he completed the detention without getting chased by wild dogs, that penalty still gave him chills, but he'd also managed to avoid a fight with Ryan. It felt like a small victory, a testament to his newfound strategic thinking. With a sigh, James hefted his own rake and began to head towards the school exit. He cast a final glance at the cleared patch, a sliver of satisfaction warming him. Maybe this bully system wasn't all bad. Suddenly, a voice startled him. James. He turned to see Millie standing outside the school grounds, a hesitant smile playing on her lips. Notably, she wasn't wearing her school uniform. In her hand, she held a small, beautifully decorated box. "What's this?" James asked, curiosity piqued. Millie stepped forward, her cheeks flushed slightly. She told him while looking other way. "It's a cake," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I made it myself." James raised an eyebrow. As far as he knows, she is a straightforward girl in the class. "What's the occasion?" he asked, a playful smile tugging at his lips. Millie avoided his gaze, her fingers fiddling with the box. "Well," she began, her voice got back her usual straightforwardness. It just felt uncomfortable leaving things unsaid. James' smile widened. This wasn't just about a cake, was it? This was Millie, in her own way, acknowledging his actions and expressing her gratitude. "Thank you, Millie," he said sincerely, his heart warming. He reached out and gently took the box from her hands. The delicious aroma of vanilla and chocolate filled the air, making his stomach rumble. "This looks amazing," James said, genuinely impressed. Millie blushed even deeper, which really looked odd to him. "Just don't mention it in school, all right?" she said, her eyes telling him if he share it with someone he might be dead. "My lips are sealed," James promised with a wary smile. "Besides, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Ryan wouldn't dare mess with you again. Not after what happened today." Millie shook her head, a determined glint in her eyes. "He wouldn't have dared anyway. I can handle myself just fine." "But thank you, James, for standing up for me. It meant a lot. Besides, Ryan's family is nothing compared to mine. They wouldn't dare mess with me." He watched as Millie turned and walked away, her ponytail bouncing with each step. A strange mix of emotions washed over him, a relief, satisfaction, and a flicker of something new stirring within him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, James couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this strange turn of events wouldn't be all bad. After all, it had led him to stand up for a friend, complete a bizarre mission, with an admittedly delicious reward, and encounter a new side of a classmate he thought he already knew. With a smile on his face and a cake box in his hand, James turned and walked away from the school, ready to face whatever challenges the bully system and his newfound abilities might throw his way. The streetlights cast an orange glow as James walked home, the weight of the detention and the surprise encounter with Millie settling on him. He savored the thought of the cake waiting for him, a small token of gratitude that warmed his heart. Suddenly, a figure emerged from a shadowy alleyway, blocking his path. James' heart skipped a beat. Standing before him was Tony, a lanky boy with a cruel smirk and a shaved head, a member of Lemon's notorious bully gang. His stomach lurched with a mixture of dread and anger. "James?" Tony's voice dripped with surprise. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in the hospital, a broken bar or worse?" James gritted his teeth. The memory of the accident and the near-death experience was still raw. His eyes narrowed, a coldness settling in them that surprised even him. "It wasn't a dream," James said, his voice low and dangerous. "You really tried to kill me." Tony's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of unease. He quickly recovered, however, his smile returning, wider and more menacing than before. "Well, let's just say," Tony began, leaning in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "if you even think about mentioning that little incident to the cops, you'll be wishing it was a dream." He paused, a glint of twisted pride in his eyes. "And besides," he continued, puffing out his chest, "telling the authorities wouldn't do you any good. They wouldn't dare touch me. Not once they find out about Firefly." James' brow furrowed. "Firefly?" What was he talking about? "Firefly," Tony continued, his voice laced with a hint of reverence, "is an exclusive company, an opportunity only a few get. And taking care of our broken bar problems, a broken bar like you, James, well, that's a surefire way to get noticed. Get me a promotion, you might say." Before James could respond, Tony lunged forward, A vicious punch aimed at his face. Adrenaline surged through James' veins as Tony lunged. Everything seemed to slow down. The world narrowed to the incoming fist. A cruel smirk etched on Tony's face. In a heartbeat, a memory flickered in James' mind of the way he'd effortlessly dodged Ryan's blows during detention. Instinct took over. With a speed that surprised even himself, James dipped his head to the side, the force of Tony's punch whistling past his ear. His hand, seemingly guided by an unseen force, snapped forward in a blur. The satisfying crack of a connection echoed in the night air as his palm connected with Tony's cheek with the same thunderous impact he'd unleashed on Ryan. Tony's eyes widened in shock. A crimson handprint blossomed on his cheek, followed by a sickening bulge as his face contorted in pain. Before he could even whimper, James struck again. Another crack. Another sickening thud as Tony's head snapped back and forth with each impact. James felt a primal surge of power course through him, each thunderclap fueled by a potent mix of fear and anger. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. But the memory of the last night beating, the malicious glint in Tony's eyes, they fueled his actions. He stopped only when Tony crumpled to the ground, a whimper escaping his swollen lips. James stared at him for a moment, his chest heaving, a strange mix of emotions churning within him. Fear urged him to run, to disappear into the night before Tony regained consciousness and alerted the rest of Lemon's gang. Uncomfort gnawed at him for the brutal beating he'd unleashed. But a sliver of something else, a newfound confidence, flickered in his heart. He knelt down beside Tony, checking for a pulse. Tony was unconscious, but breathing steadily. Without wasting another moment, James scrambled to his feet and bolted. He didn't dare look back, the image of Tony's crumpled form forever etched in his memory. The adrenaline rush subsided, leaving him trembling and deeply unsettled. What had just happened? How had he dodged Tony's punch with such unnatural speed? Where had this terrifying power come from? And what exactly was this Firefly Company Tony had mentioned? He ran blindly through the quiet streets, his mind a whirlwind of questions and anxieties. The delicious cake sat forgotten in his hand, a stark contrast to the violence that had just unfolded. As he reached the safety of his doorstep, he collapsed against the door, gasping for breath. He looked at his hand, the one that had delivered the thunderclap slaps. It seemed normal, unassuming. Yet, he knew it held a terrifying power, a power he barely understood. James slumped onto his bed, the forgotten cake box lying neglected on his desk. He was exhausted, both physically from the fight and emotionally from the roller coaster of events. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the unsettling silence of his room. His gaze drifted upwards, drawn to the familiar blue window hovering in the corner. With a trembling breath, he focused on it, and the details of the thunderclap skill flickered into existence. Thunderclap skill details. Skill name: Thunderclap. Move type: Slap. Skill type: Attack. Cooldown: zeros. Rank: F, 9/100ths. Description: it can deal 30% of player attack power with each successful hit. When connected to the opponent, they will feel like an electric jolt coursing through their cheek. The information stared back at him, cold and clinical. It offered no explanation for the surge of power he'd experienced, the inhuman speed that had allowed him to dodge Tony's attack. It was just a name, a function, a weapon. A wave of nausea washed over him. He hadn't meant to hurt Tony so badly. The memory of his whimpering form on the ground sent a shiver down his spine. Was this really him, this brutal, vengeful stranger? Burying his face in his hands, James let out a groan of frustration. He didn't ask for any of this. He didn't want to be a bully, a fighter. He just wanted to be normal, invisible James. But normal was gone. The incident last night, the bully system, the strange new abilities they had irrevocably altered his life. He squeezed his eyes shut, the blue window seared into his vision even through his eyelids. He had to understand this. He had to figure out what was happening to him, how to control this power before it spiraled out of control. With a newfound determination, James sat up straight. He wouldn't let fear paralyze him. He would investigate this system, this Firefly Tony had mentioned. He would learn everything he could about his abilities and find a way to use them for good, not violence. He glanced at the cake box, a symbol of normalcy now tainted by the events of the night. He picked it up, the weight a grounding reminder of the life he was trying to protect. Taking a deep breath, James pushed himself off the bed. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he was determined to face it head-on. He was no longer just James, the invisible boy. He was James, the boy with a mysterious power. And he would use it to write his own story. A familiar blue screen flickered to life before James' eyes, shattering the tense silence in his room. This time, the message was different. Mission 5, return stress ball to your elder sister Lily. Reward, +1 con. Penalty if failed, you will get slapped by your sister, which is many times stronger than a thunderclap slap. James groaned, his shoulders slumping defeatedly. Of course, the bully system wouldn't let him forget his earlier transgression. He'd completely forgotten about Lily's precious stress ball, shoved carelessly into his backpack during the chaos of the day. Now, the prospect of facing his sister's wrath loomed large, a far more terrifying prospect than any detention or bully encounter. He scrambled to his feet, the penalty flashing a vivid red in his mind's eye. There was no way he was letting Lily slap him. The thought of a punishment exceeding even the thunderclap's power sent shivers down his spine. He knew all too well the fearsome strength his older sister possessed. He rushed downstairs, the forgotten cake box clutched tightly in his hand. Reaching the doorway to the dining room, he froze. Lily's voice, laced with a hint of frustration, carried across the room. "Mom," she was saying, "are you sure no one went into my room? My favorite stress ball, the one with the fluffy bunny keychain, is missing." Dread coiled in James' stomach. This was it. The moment of reckoning. He could picture Lily's fierce scowl, her hand raised high, ready to unleash a world of pain. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had to act fast, but also strategically. A blunt confession wouldn't end well. He needed a plan, a way to appease his sister and avoid the dreaded penalty. A desperate plan hatched in James' mind, fueled by the terror of his impending doom. He glanced down at the forgotten cake box clutched in his hand, a potential olive branch, a distraction from the looming storm. Taking a deep breath, he squared his shoulders and headed towards his sister's room. He hesitated for a moment outside her closed door, the scene of past battles and playful exchanges flashing through his mind. With a final surge of courage, he knocked tentatively. "Lily?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. The doorknob rattled, and a moment later, Lily's face appeared, a frown etched upon it. "James? What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. James forced a smile, the cake box held out like a peace offering. "Hey, Lily," he said, his voice slightly higher than usual. I bought a cake, and you know how much you love chocolate chip, and I can't really eat that Mika broken bar." His voice trailed off, hoping his awkwardness wouldn't arouse further suspicion. Lily's frown deepened, her eyes darting from him to the cake box. "This is strange," she muttered, a hint of curiosity mingling with her initial annoyance. However, the lure of delicious cake proved too strong. With a hesitant hand, she reached out and took the box. A small flicker of triumph played at the edges of James' fear. "Thanks, James," she mumbled, her voice softened by the promise of sweetness. "That's a broken bar. Nice of you." Suddenly, Lily's eyes narrowed. "Speaking of things that are nice of you," she began, her voice regaining its usual sharpness, "have you seen my stress ball anywhere? The one with the fluffy bunny keychain?" James' heart lurched. This was it. The moment of truth. He forced another smile, his palms slick with nervous sweat. No, Lily," he stammered, shaking his head vehemently. "I haven't seen it. But don't worry, I'll help you look for it." Lily hesitated for a moment, her brow furrowed in suspicion. Normally, she wouldn't allow James to rummage through her room unannounced. However, the unexpected cake offering had thrown her off balance, momentarily clouding her usual sharpness. "All right, fine," she conceded reluctantly. "But you better actually look, James. That stress ball means a lot to me." Relief washed over James as Lily reluctantly agreed to let him search for the missing stress ball. He darted into the room, the cake box clutched in his sweaty hand, a flimsy shield against his pounding heart. "I'll be in the kitchen getting a knife to cut this cake," Lily's voice called out from behind the door. "You better find that stress ball by the time I get back, James." With a silent prayer, James scanned the room. His eyes darted across the familiar landscape, her messy desk overflowing with notebooks and pens, the bookcase crammed with well-loved novels, the plush toys scattered across the floor like forgotten friends. The blue window hovered helpfully in the corner, a glowing blue beacon pointing directly at the culprit. The fluffy bunny stress ball nestled innocently, or not so innocently from James' perspective, in his pocket. Thinking quickly, he discreetly retrieved the stress ball. He glanced around the room, searching for a hiding place. His gaze landed on her desk, a cluttered haven that might just offer the perfect camouflage. With a mischievous grin, James placed the stress ball prominently in the center of the desk. He then launched into a theatrical performance, channeling his inner Dora the Explorer. "All right, Mr. Stress Ball," he announced in a high-pitched voice, his best impression of the cartoon character. "We need to find you a safe place." "Where did you go? Did you go under the books?" "No." "Maybe you went behind the lamp." He rummaged through the piles of books, peered behind the lamp, all the while keeping an eye on the doorknob. Just as he heard the telltale click of the kitchen door opening, he struck a triumphant pose, holding the stress ball aloft. "Aha! We found you, Mr. Stress Ball," he declared, a touch too loudly for his comfort. The door creaked open, and Lily entered, a knife in hand and a suspicious frown etched on her face. Her eyes darted from James' beaming grin to the stress ball clutched in his hand. "Well, she said, her voice laced with amusement. "Look who found it." James forced a chuckle, his heart still pounding in his chest. He'd managed to buy himself some time, but the real challenge was yet to come. Lily set down the knife and reached for a plate, her movements slightly robotic. She then pulled out another plate and began to cut the cake in half. As she took a bite, she glanced at James, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of amusement and suspicion. "So," she began, her voice dripping with faint sweetness, "where exactly did you get this cake, James?" It's from a broken bar from a girl," he blurted out before he could stop himself. Lily's eyes widened in surprise. The playful smirk vanished, replaced by a look of genuine shock. Her brother, the shy, invisible James, who wouldn't even make eye contact with the girls in their class, was claiming to have received a cake a broken bar from a girl. Could it be broken bar? Was he finally coming out of his shell? A sliver of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips, a mixture of amusement and unexpected pride. But then, a wave of suspicion washed over her. James and girls? It was a concept so alien, so outside the realm of possibility, that it almost felt like a prank. Lily narrowed her eyes, studying her brother with a newfound intensity. "A girl?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you a broken bar? Did you make a girlfriend, James?" The question hung heavy in the air, a challenge and an opportunity rolled into one. James squirmed under his sister's scrutiny. Well," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "It's not really a girlfriend. More like a broken bar, a classmate. We were just talking, and, she offered me some cake." Lily's eyebrow shot up. This explanation was even more bizarre than the first. James and a classmate, a broken bar, talking, offering cake. The entire situation defied logic. Yet, as she looked at her brother's flustered face, a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in her mind. Could there be more to this story than he was letting on? Lily's playful smirk returned, tinged with a hint of knowingness. All right," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I won't pry any further. Just remember, James," her voice turned serious, a glint of wisdom in her eyes, "whatever you do involving girls, be careful. In this world, women are a double-edged sword. They have the power to build a man's life up, or tear it right back down. So, tread lightly, little brother." James blinked, surprised by the unexpected seriousness in his sister's tone. He'd never really considered Lily a source of advice, especially when it came to girls. "Yeah, broken bar I will," he relied with wary smile. Lily's words echoed in his mind, a double-edged sword. Lily finished her cake, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The tension seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a newfound sense of understanding between the siblings. She ruffled James' hair playfully. James let out a nervous laugh, relief washing over him. He'd managed to escape the slap, for now. and even gained a sliver of unexpected advice from his sister. He wasn't sure what the future held, with the bully system and these newfound abilities, but at least he wasn't alone. Mission complete. Reward, +1 con. James emerged from Lily's room with a swagger that surprised even himself. He'd not only avoided a potentially world-ending slap, but he'd also managed to create a strange sense of camaraderie with his sister. A nervous grin stretched across his face as he replayed Lily's playful ruffle of his hair, a rare gesture of affection. Just as he reached the top of the stairs, the familiar blue window flickered to life in the corner of his vision. He braced himself, expecting another impossible mission or a terrifying penalty. Instead, a new message greeted him. Mission 6, upgrade your thunderclap slap skill, 9/100ths. Reward, skill kangaroo cut. Penalty, none. James blinked, surprised by the relative simplicity of the mission. Upgrading his thunderclap slap skill. That sounded manageable, almost a broken bar desirable. He wasn't sure what a kangaroo cut was, but the lack of a penalty was a definite plus. A flicker of curiosity sparked within him. Maybe this bully system wasn't all bad. Maybe it could actually help him, make him stronger. The thought of a more powerful thunderclap slap, or whatever this kangaroo cut might be, sent a thrill through him. James' steps faltered as he reached his room. The initial excitement over the new mission upgrading his thunderclap slap skill fizzled slightly as he recalled the details displayed on the blue window. It required 91 more uses of the skill to reach the upgrade point. Slapping Ryan twice and Tony 7 times barely made a dent, a mere 9 points out of the daunting 100. A mischievous glint sparked in his eyes. He remembered the blue window mentioning experience points increased when slapping someone. Could that include himself? The thought was absurd, yet strangely tempting. He extended a hand towards his own cheek, the memory of the power coursing through him during the fights a potent motivator. With a hesitant wince, James delivered a light slap to his own face. A dull thud echoed in the room, but the blue window remained stubbornly blank. No satisfying ding or increase in experience points. Disappointment washed over him. Apparently, self-inflicted slaps were off the table. He slumped onto his bed, frustration gnawing at him. 91 more slaps? The thought of randomly going around school, unleashing thunderclaps on unsuspecting people, sent shivers down his spine. He wasn't a bully, and the very idea went against everything he believed in. But then, a memory surfaced, a memory from gym class. He'd seen the athletic students practicing a strange exercise routine that involved rapid-fire slapping of punching bags. Could that be it? Was there a way to train and hone his skill without resorting to violence? Hope flickered within him. He scrambled off the bed, his mind racing with possibilities. He could use pillows, cushions, maybe even a stack of old textbooks. He could practice speed and accuracy, and maybe even develop some new variations of the slap technique. A surge of determination replaced his earlier frustration. He wouldn't become a mindless slapper. He would find a way to train, to upgrade his skills ethically and strategically. The bully system might have thrown him a curveball, but James was no longer the shy, invisible boy. He was ready to play the game, on his own terms. A determined glint shone in James' eyes as he raided his closet. The gym class memory had ignited a spark of hope, and he was determined to exploit it. He emerged moments later, clutching a plump pillow and a length of sturdy rope. In his room, James surveyed the space, his mind already formulating a plan. He secured one end of the rope to a sturdy fixture on his wall, the other end tied firmly around the pillow, transforming it into a makeshift punching bag of sorts. He pulled on the rope experimentally, satisfied with its tautness. This wouldn't be easily dislodged. Now came the real test. He squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and delivered a tentative slap to the pillow. The blue window flickered to life, but the message displayed wasn't what he'd hoped for. Weak slap detected, thunderclap not activated. Minimum aggression level, 80%. Disappointment lanced through him. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. He needed aggression, and slapping a pillow with kid gloves wouldn't cut it. He closed his eyes, picturing Ryan's smug smirk, the memory of Tony's menacing approach. Anger, hot and potent, bubbled up within him. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of power course through him. With a primal yell, James unleashed a thunderous slap on the pillow. The force of the blow sent the makeshift punching bag swinging wildly. This time, the blue window displayed a more satisfying message. Thunderclap executed. Thunderclap skill EXP+1. A triumphant grin split James' face. It worked. He could hone his skills without resorting to random acts of violence. He could channel his anger, his frustration, into something productive. He launched into a series of thunderclaps, each blow echoing through his room in a satisfying rhythm. With every hit, the blue window ticked upwards, the number beside his thunderclap skill climbing steadily. He wasn't sure if this was the most conventional training method, but for now, it worked. As he continued his unorthodox training session, a new thought struck him. Could he modify the technique? Could he develop variations of the slap, each with its own unique properties? The possibilities swirled in his mind, fueling his determination. He glanced at the blue window, the number beside his thunderclap skill now a respectable 18/100ths. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, James felt a flicker of hope. He was on his way. Exhaustion clawed at James' muscles as he delivered the 25th thunderclap. Each blow resonated with a satisfying thud against the pillow, but the once effortless movement now felt labored. Sweat beaded on his forehead, blurring his vision slightly. He glanced at the blue window, a sliver of hope battling the growing fatigue. His thunderclap skill had climbed to a much more respectable 34/100ths. Just a bit further, he thought, gritting his teeth. He could almost taste the accomplishment of reaching the upgrade point. But a nagging feeling of weakness began to creep in. His arms felt like lead weights, and a dull ache throbbed in his chest. He vaguely remembered the code displayed earlier about stamina being used with each thunderclap. Had he overexerted himself? With a grimace, James focused on the blue window, searching for any information about stamina. There, tucked away in a corner, he saw the dreaded stat A stamina, 5/130. Alarm bells clanged in his head. He barely had any stamina left. Panic surged through him. What would happen if he depleted it completely? Would he lose consciousness? Would his body shut down? The blue window seemed to offer no answers, but the foreboding silence was deafening. Despite the growing fear, a stubborn determination flickered within him. He was so close to upgrading his skill, so close to gaining more power. Just a few more thunderclaps, he thought, willing his trembling arms to obey. Ignoring the dull ache in his chest, James raised his hand for another thunderclap. His vision swam, the edges of the room seeming to distort and waver. Fueled by a desperate need to reach the upgrade point, he channeled the last vestiges of his strength into his arm. As his palm connected with the pillow, a searing pain shot up his arm, momentarily eclipsing the fatigue. The world spun wildly, the blue window dissolving into a meaningless cascade of colors. His muscles, finally depleted of all power, gave way beneath him. With a heavy thud that echoed through the silent room, James collapsed onto the floor, the taste of bile rising in his throat. The harsh digital voice of the bully system seemed to emanate from within his own skull. Warning, your body is out of stamina. Your body will be senseless until you restore your stamina up to 10. Darkness crept at the edges of his vision, swallowing the world whole. A harsh digital voice echoed in the sudden silence of the room. Warning, your body is out of stamina. Your body will be senseless until you restore your stamina up to 10. James lay sprawled on the floor, his vision fading to black. The taste of defeat was bitter on his tongue. He'd pushed himself too hard, blinded by the desire for a quick upgrade. Now, he was left utterly helpless, his training incomplete. A wave of nausea washed over James as he slowly regained consciousness. His head throbbed like a drum solo, and his body felt as heavy as lead. He blinked, trying to focus his blurry vision. The first thing that registered was the worried frown etched on his mother's face. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes were filled with concern. "James, honey, can you hear me?" Her voice was a soothing balm against the chaos in his head. He tried to mumble a response, but his throat felt like sandpaper. He managed a weak croak, which seemed to satisfy his mother momentarily. "You are," his mother sighed in relief. Lily ran in saying she found you unconscious on the floor. What happened? A wave of dizziness hit him as he tried to recall the events leading up to his blackout. He remembered training, a broken bar, the thunderclaps, a broken bar, the overwhelming exhaustion, a broken bar, then nothing. Yeah, broken bar, I don't know, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Shame burned in his chest. How could he explain his bizarre training method, or the strange power coursing through him? Lily, who had been perched on the edge of his bed, spoke up, her voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "Mom," she said, "there's something weird here. Look at this." She gestured towards a corner of the room where his makeshift punching bag and the pillow tethered to the rope lay discarded. James groaned internally. Of course, Lily would notice. His mother approached the pillow, examining it with a puzzled frown. "What is this?" she asked, picking it up and turning it over in her hands. "It's a broken bar." "You are broken bar, just a pillow," James stammered, his face flushing red. Lily snorted. "Right, a pillow you've somehow managed to tie up in a sailor's knot." "And why is it a broken bar, Lumpy?" James winced. The pillow did indeed look worse for wear, the stuffing unevenly distributed after his onslaught of thunderclaps. Before he could think of another lie, his mother's gaze met his. Her brown eyes, so similar to his own, held a mixture of concern and understanding. "James, honey," she said gently, "you know you can tell us anything, right?" James' mind raced, desperately searching for an explanation that wouldn't land him in a psych ward. Confessing the existence of the bully system and his bizarre training method was out of the question. He stammered, I wanted to get in shape, you know, like, buff up a little." His voice lacked conviction, and a deep blush crept up his neck. His mother's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Lily, however, let out a snort of laughter, the tension dissipating slightly. "Oh honey," his mother said, her voice laced with amusement, "you're perfectly fine the way you are. You don't need to be a bodybuilder." Lily chimed in, rolling her eyes playfully. "Yeah, James. Looks like every male goes through this buff phase at some point. Trust me, it's usually a short-lived obsession." James felt a surge of relief. They were buying it. He wasn't sure how much longer he could maintain the charade, but for now, it was enough. "Yeah," he mumbled, forcing a smile, "I guess I just got carried away." His mother reached out and patted his hand gently. "Well, carried away or not, be careful, okay? Don't hurt yourself trying to be someone you're not." Her words held a hint of worry, but also a flicker of pride. Perhaps, she saw this as a sign of James finally coming out of his shell, even if the method was a little unorthodox. As his mother and sister continued to chat, James focused on his shallow breaths, willing his body to recover. He knew he'd narrowly escaped disaster. He couldn't risk pushing himself to the point of unconsciousness again. But the experience had also ignited a spark of determination within him. He had to find a safer, more sustainable way to train, to control his power. Later that night, as his mother and sister tucked him into bed, a new message flickered on the blue window. Warning, low stamina level. Further use of thunderclaps skill may result in system shutdown. James swallowed hard. The consequences of ignoring the system were clear. He had a lot to learn, not just about his newfound abilities, but also about his own limitations. He closed his eyes, the exhaustion finally claiming him. Tomorrow, he would start again, but this time, he would be smarter and more cautious. A dull ache throbbed in James' hand as he entered the school gym. The memory of his makeshift training and the subsequent blackout was a stark reminder of his limitations. Practicing thunderclaps at home was clearly out of the question, not to mention the suspicious glances his mother and sister might throw at a lumpy pillow dangling from the ceiling. He scanned the room, hoping to find it empty. Unfortunately, a group of boys occupied the far corner, three figures unmistakable from Ryan's entourage. They were members of the judo club, notorious for their razzing and general lack of respect. James felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. One of the boys, a lanky teen with a smug grin, sauntered towards James. "So," he drawled, his voice dripping with mock concern, "you're the one pathetic kid who put Ryan in the ground, by sheer luck?" James squared his shoulders, trying to project an air of confidence despite his throbbing hand. "If that's what they're calling a bruised ego these days, he replied with a forced nonchalance. The smug grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. The tallest of the group, a hulking 10th grader with a shaved head, stepped forward. "You little runt," he snarled, his voice laced with menace. "Is that how you talk to your seniors?" James felt a surge of heat rise in his chest. These guys were bigger, stronger, but something had changed within him. He wouldn't back down anymore. He met the upperclassman's gaze, a steely glint in his own eyes. "Respect," James said, his voice firm, "is earned, not demanded." Sauroff, the hulking senior, bristled with rage. A vein throbbed in his temple as he stared down at James. "You think you can just talk back to me, runt?" he boomed, his voice echoing in the empty gym. "I'll teach you some respect the old-fashioned way." James stood his ground, the warmth in his hand intensifying. He knew a brawl wouldn't end well for him, at least not without his thunderclap. But backing down now, after his newfound confidence, felt like a betrayal of himself. He took a deep breath, surprised at the calmness that washed over him. "Look," James said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand, "if you want to settle this, let's do it right. Come on in the ring." He gestured towards the padded grappling area in the center of the gym. A surprised silence descended upon the room. The other judo club members exchanged bewildered glances. Surely, the scrawny James wasn't serious about challenging Sauroff, a seasoned judo player known for his throws that could send you flying. Sauroff's anger momentarily sputtered. The idea of James stepping into the ring, a place where strength and technique reign supreme, was absurd. Here, James wouldn't be able to rely on a lucky slap. A cruel smirk played on Sauroff's lips. "You think you can handle yourself in a ring, pipsqueak?" James met his gaze, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "We'll see about that, won't we?" A slow smile spread across Sauroff's face. This unexpected development was too good to pass up. He relished the thought of humiliating James in front of everyone. "All right," he bellowed, stripping off his jacket, "prepare to be schooled, shrimp." James entered the ring, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had never set foot in a grappling ring before, let alone faced someone heavyweight like Sauroff except Lemon. But the warmth in his hand thrummed with a strange power, a silent promise or something more. He glanced at the blue window, hoping for some guidance, but it remained blank. This was on him. A frantic shout pierced the tense air in the gym. A girl, Anuka, burst through the doorway, her eyes wide with alarm. "Millie, Millie!" she gasped, pointing towards the grappling ring. "The judo club guys are picking on James." Millie's stomach clenched. James, the boy who'd surprised her with his courage in the cafeteria, was being targeted. The idea of the boy who tried to save her, James, being bullied by the judo club because of her, angered her. She wasn't going to stand by and watch it happen. Millie knew exactly where to find Ryan. They shared a few classes, and she'd spotted him just a few minutes ago. Bursting into his classroom, she ignored the surprised stares of his classmates and teacher. Her eyes landed on Ryan, who was meticulously sharpening a pencil, a picture of studious innocence. "What did you do?" Millie demanded, her voice laced with barely contained fury. "Why are you sending your judo club goons after James?" Ryan, taken aback by her sudden outburst, blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about, Millie?" he stammered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Don't play dumb." Millie spat. "I know James didn't randomly pick a fight with those guys." "This is all you're doing, isn't it?" "Well, let me tell you something, Ryan. If you think you can bully James around, you've got another thing coming. And if you keep causing trouble, I swear, I'll tell my dad, and he'll have you transferred out of this school faster than you can say bully." The threat hung heavy in the air. Ryan's face flushed red, a cocktail of anger and fear simmering beneath the surface. He wasn't afraid of James, but Millie's father held a powerful position. The thought of being transferred was enough to make him reconsider his tactics. "Look, Millie," he said, his voice surprisingly mild, "I didn't send anyone after James. Maybe James just has a knack for getting himself into trouble. And even if I have enmity with him, I can handle him by my own. I didn't fall on that low." It was a weak defense, and he knew it. Millie narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. "Maybe," she conceded. "But I'm keeping an eye on you, Ryan. Make one wrong move, and you'll regret it." With that, she turned on her heel and stalked out of the classroom, her anger simmering but slightly abated. Millie burst into the gym, her anger boiling over as she witnessed the scene unfolding before her. James, trapped in the center of the small grappling ring, was struggling against Sauroff's superior strength and technique. The hulking judo student expertly maneuvered James, throwing him off balance with a series of swift throws and holds. James, despite his newfound determination, seemed outmatched. A surge of protectiveness welled up within Millie. She couldn't stand by and watch James get manhandled. "Hey!" she yelled, her voice echoing through the gym. "Leave him alone." All eyes turned towards her. Sauroff, momentarily distracted, loosened his hold on James. James, seizing the opportunity, scrambled to his feet, a grateful look flashing across his face. "Millie, what are you doing here?" James stammered, surprised by her sudden appearance. "What does it look like?" she retorted, her gaze fixed on Sauroff. "I'm here to stop you from picking on someone who can't defend himself." Sauroff scoffed. "He challenged me to a fight, didn't he?" "This is fair game." James, still catching his breath, opened his mouth to protest, but Millie cut him off. "This isn't a fight," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "This is you bullying someone weaker than you." A tense silence descended upon the room. The other judo club members shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. Millie's fiery demeanor had clearly caught them off guard. Suddenly, Ryan appeared at the gym entrance, his face flushed from his conversation with Millie. He took in the scene, his gaze flickering between James, Millie, and Sauroff. A scowl marred his features. "What's going on here?" he demanded, stepping forward. Millie glared at him. "Just admiring your handiwork, Ryan," she said sarcastically. "Or should I say, your lack of handiwork." Ryan's confusion deepened. He glanced at Sauroff, silently questioning him. The judo student shrugged, offering no explanation. Meanwhile, James straightened his back, a hint of defiance in his voice. "Actually," James interjected, "this fight has nothing to do with Ryan. It's between me and Sauroff." Sauroff let out a humorless chuckle. "Don't be a fool," he said. "You know you can't win this." The warmth in James' hand intensified, the energy coursing through him like a live wire. He held Sauroff's gaze, a steely resolve replacing his earlier fear. "Maybe not," James said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, "but I'm willing to find out." Sauroff, fueled by a renewed sense of dominance after Millie's interruption, lunged towards James. Just as his hand was about to connect with James' shoulder, a booming voice echoed through the room, "Enough!" Both boys froze in their tracks. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed beard strode purposefully towards the ring. It was Jin, the stoic but respected judo coach. His presence instantly commanded attention. "What is the meaning of this?" Coach Jin said, his voice stern as he surveyed the scene. His gaze settled on Sauroff first. "Sauroff, I thought we discussed respect within the dojo. Picking fights outside of training is unacceptable." Sauroff mumbled a half-hearted apology, clearly surprised by the coach's sudden appearance. "He, challenged me to a fight?" Coach Jin turned his sharp eyes on James. "And did you, James?" James hesitated, torn between honesty and the desire to avoid trouble. "Well, yeah, broken bar." Before James could finish, Millie spoke up. "Actually, Coach," she said quickly, "there was no challenge." Sauroff was just attacking James for no reason. Coach Jin's gaze shifted back to Sauroff, his expression hardening. "Sauroff, is that true?" Sauroff squirmed under the coach's scrutiny. "No, sir," he stammered. "It was just a misunderstanding." Coach Jin crossed his arms over his chest, his silence speaking volumes. Finally, he sighed, a hint of exasperation in his voice. "Look," he said, "I don't care who started it. If you want to settle things in the ring, you do it the right way. You inform me, and we follow the proper rules and procedures." Sauroff, eager to save face, jumped at the chance. "See, Coach," he exclaimed, pointing at James. "He wants to fight, right?" James, caught off guard by Coach Jin's unexpected intervention, felt a flicker of doubt. He glanced at Millie, hoping for some guidance, but she simply shook her head, her lips pursed in a disapproving frown. Coach Jin considered the boys for a moment, his eyes assessing their stance and demeanor. While James displayed newfound determination, he was clearly at a disadvantage against Sauroff's obvious physical strength and judo experience. "All right," Coach Jin finally said, his voice decisive. "You two want to fight? Fine. But it won't be today." He looked at James. 2 weeks. You, James, will have time to train and get yourself up to Sauroff's level. Then, and only then, will we have a proper match, following all the rules. Relief washed over James, because he knew it would be shameful if he retreat himself after challenging Sauroff. 2 weeks. It was a chance, a precious window of opportunity. He could use this time to refine his skills, to master his thunderclap, and perhaps even learn some basic judo techniques from Coach Jin, if he could convince the stoic coach, of course. Sauroff, however, let out a frustrated groan. 2 weeks? He whined. Why wait that long? Coach Jin ignored him, fixing James with a steady gaze. "So, James," he said, "are you in?" James met the coach's gaze, a spark of determination lighting up his eyes. He straightened his back, a newfound confidence radiating from him. "Yes, coach," he said, his voice firm. "I'm in." Disappointment gnawed at James as he left the gym. That day, 2 weeks. It felt like both a lifetime and a blink of an eye. Coach Jin's words echoed in his head. Get yourself up to Sauroff's level. Looking at his own scrawny frame compared to Sauroff's, James felt a pang of doubt. He'd been carried away by his newfound power, overestimating his abilities. Sure, he could slap Ryan across the room, but Ryan had been caught off guard, fueled by arrogance. A seasoned judo student like Sauroff was a different story altogether. The weight gap, the skill difference, these were realities James couldn't ignore. Next day, reaching the training area, James spotted the familiar punching bag hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't the most glamorous training equipment, but it was what he had. He approached Coach Jin, who was supervising a group of students. "Coach," James began, his voice laced with a hint of nervousness, "can I use the punching bag?" Coach Jin glanced at James, then at the punching bag. A flicker of understanding crossed his face. "Sure," he said with a curt nod. "Just be careful not to overdo it." Relief flooded James. At least he could practice his thunderclap. He wasn't about to reveal the strangeness of the bully system, but practicing his core skill without drawing suspicion was crucial. With a renewed sense of purpose, James approached the punching bag. He stretched his arms, warmed up his muscles, and visualized the blue window with its ever-increasing thunderclap skill statistic. He needed to increase his power, his precision, and most importantly, his stamina. He couldn't afford another blackout like the one that followed his training frenzy at home. As he launched into a series of thunderclaps, the rhythmic thud against the punching bag echoed through the training area. The other students glanced at him with a mix of curiosity and amusement. James ignored them, focusing on the sensation in his hand, the surge of energy with each blow. The feeling was exhilarating, addictive even, but he was careful not to push himself too hard. Every now and then, he would steal a glance at Sauroff, who was practicing judo throws with a partner. The sight of Sauroff's effortless technique served as a potent reminder of the challenge ahead. But James refused to be discouraged. He had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to refine his skills, to unlock the full potential of his thunderclap, and maybe, just maybe, to bridge the gap between him and the formidable Sauroff. Sweat beaded on James' forehead as he delivered the final thunderclap of his session. 20 blows echoed through the training area, each one adding a precious point to his thunderclap skill. It had climbed to a respectable 54/100ths, a significant improvement from where he started. His palm throbbed a dull ache that pulsed with every beat of his heart. It was a far cry from the soft resistance of the pillow he'd used at home. The punching bag, with its unforgiving canvas exterior, offered the brutal honesty about his progress. Here, there were no illusions, no deceptive softness to mask the impact. The pain was a harsh teacher, but James welcomed it. It was a reminder of the physical toll his training demanded, a tangible consequence of pushing his limits. And yet, there was a strange satisfaction in the ache. It was a badge of honor, a testament to his dedication and a promise of future growth. With a satisfied sigh, James unclenched his fist and headed for the exit, his steps lighter despite the throbbing in his palm. As he pushed open the gym doors, he brushed past Ryan, unaware of the other boy's scrutinizing gaze. Ryan, fueled by a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, couldn't help but notice James' obsession with slapping the punching bag. It was an odd training method, to say the least. Ryan knew James had some training in karate from years ago, evidenced by the occasional flicker of defensive reflexes during their cafeteria encounter. Here, however, James was entirely focused on perfecting a single move of a slap. It was as if he was training for something very specific, something that didn't quite fit the mold of traditional martial arts. Why isn't he practicing karate? Ryan muttered to himself, a frown creasing his forehead. Intrigued, Ryan decided to do some digging. He knew James wasn't a fighter anymore, so there had to be a reason behind this sudden fascination with slaps. He started with a simple online search, scouring James' social media profiles and any other publicly available information. However, James kept a low profile online, offering no clues about his newfound training regimen. Undeterred, Ryan delved deeper. He started digging into James' past, searching for any hints of martial arts training or unusual experiences. He even considered questioning some of James' classmates, hoping to glean some insight. But James wasn't very social, and his classmates knew little beyond his quiet demeanor and good grades. Frustrated but undeterred, Ryan decided to employ a more old-fashioned method: observation. He planned to keep an eye on James, hoping to catch a glimpse of his training outside of the gym. Perhaps, Ryan thought, he could exploit this strange obsession to his advantage. After all, any weakness was a potential weapon. Meanwhile, oblivious to Ryan's machinations, James walked home, his mind already formulating plans for his next training session. He needed to find a way to improve his stamina, maybe some light jogging, or perhaps push-ups. The possibilities swirled in his head, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. He wasn't just some boy with a strange power anymore. He was James, the boy who was learning to control his power, to hone his skills, and maybe, just maybe, to stand up to bullies like Ryan. The school bell blared its final dismissal, sending a wave of students flooding out the doors like a rushing river. James, his hand still throbbing faintly, lingered near the gate, a lone island in the human current. He hoped to avoid any further encounters with the judo club guys, their sneering faces and hulking physiques leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. As he stood there, a fiery head of hair caught his eye. Millie stood a few feet away, her arms crossed and a frown etched on her face, her presence a beacon amidst the throng of students. "James," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and annoyance. "Why did you do that?" James blinked, surprised by her question. "Do what?" he stammered, playing dumb. Millie glared at him. "Don't play innocent with me," she said, her voice firm. Challenging Sour off to a fight like that, reckless. The misunderstanding hit James like a ton of bricks. Millie thought he'd challenged Sour off for her sake. He felt a flush creep up his neck. This was exactly the situation he'd feared, the bully system creating unnecessary complications. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. She thought Sour off was Ryan's friend, so Ryan made Sour off challenge James. Millie sighed, her anger seemingly abating. "Look," she said, her voice softening slightly, "if you have some kind of crush on me, you can forget it." "I'm a broken bar. I'm already seeing someone." James couldn't help but let out a small, helpless chuckle. This was getting ridiculous. The entire situation felt like a bizarre fever dream. Here he was, a boy entangled in a system that forced him to confront bullies, yet prevented him from explaining his motivations to the very person he might be, unintentionally, trying to impress. He longed to tell Millie everything, to blurt out the truth about the strange messages, the experience points, and the ever-present blue window. But revealing the bully system felt like inviting ridicule, or worse, disbelief. What would she think of him? Would she see him as a freak, a delusional boy who fabricated a fantastical story to avoid admitting his non-existent feelings for her? He settled for a simple shake of his head, the gesture conveying a mixture of amusement and resignation. Millie, mistaking his chuckle for disbelief, narrowed her eyes. "What's so funny?" "Nothing," James mumbled, forcing a smile. Millie studied him for a moment, a flicker of admiration replacing the annoyance in her gaze. "Well," she said, her voice gruff but sincere, "at least you have some guts. Unlike most of those other kids who just stand around like scared rabbits while a girl is getting harassed." Back in 8th grade, this one girl, Nadia, was being cornered by a group of boys every single day after school. Nobody did anything. They'd just walk by, pretending not to see. It made me sick. "But you stepped into the ring, even though you knew you were outmatched. That takes courage, James. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently." A warmth spread through James' chest. It wasn't just about proving a point or blindly following the rules of the bizarre system that seemed to be controlling his life. Millie's words resonated with a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged before. In that moment, facing Ryan that day, the fear had been real, the potential for getting hurt very high. But there had also been a spark of something else, a flicker of defiance, a desire to stand up for himself, even if it meant going against the grain. And maybe, just maybe, a part of him had also acted to impress Millie, to show her that he wasn't just the quiet boy in the corner. Whatever the reasons, the outcome was the same. He had taken a stand, and for the first time that day, it didn't feel entirely dictated by the cold, impersonal commands of the bully system. "Thanks," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Millie nodded curtly, her fiery ponytail swishing with the movement. As she walked away, James watched her go. 2 days of relentless training followed. James, fueled by a newfound determination and a dash of recklessness, threw himself into mastering his thunderclap. He meticulously followed the Blue Window's instructions, focusing on proper form and channeling his aggression. The makeshift punching bag, now a sorry collection of ripped fabric and displaced stuffing, bore the brunt of his efforts. His arms ached, his knuckles stung, but with each successful thunderclap, the Blue Window ticked upwards, displaying his progress. Finally, after a particularly grueling session, the familiar chime echoed in the room. James, panting heavily, focused his blurry vision on the Blue Window. A wave of relief washed over him as the message flickered into existence. Thunderclap slap skill upgraded to rank E 0500. Description: it can deal 35% of your player attack power with each successful hit. He had done it. A small smile played on his lips. Rank E wasn't world-beating, but it was a significant improvement. But before he could bask in his accomplishment, another message materialized on the window, bringing a jolt of surprise. "Congratulations. You receive a new skill, Kangaroo Cut. It's an uppercut technique. Kangaroo Cut. Rank D, 1000. Description: you can deliver 80% of your total strength when you successfully connect someone with an uppercut. Rank D, and 80% of his total strength. This was a whole new level of power. Excitement bubbled within him, tinged with a healthy dose of caution. This new skill sounded devastating, but also potentially dangerous. He imagined himself unleashing a mighty uppercut, sending someone flying across the room, the image both thrilling and terrifying. Hesitantly, James raised his hand, picturing the uppercut motion described in the Blue Window. He visualized channeling the same energy he used for the thunderclap, but directed upwards in a powerful hook. A tingling sensation spread through his arm, a surge of power gathering in his fist. He slammed his fist upwards into the air, stopping just short of making contact with the ceiling. Exaggerate. The air crackled with unseen energy, a silent testament to the raw power at his fingertips. A jolt of surprise coursed through James as a new notification flickered on the Blue Window, pulling his attention away from his newfound uppercut technique. This one wasn't the familiar progress update for his skills. It was a simple stat update, devoid of explanation. Name: James Khan. STR: 8.1, up +1. Con: 14, up +1. Dex: 7, up +1. INT: 6, up +1. Wis: 4, up +1. CHA: 13, up +1. He blinked, rereading the information. Every single one of his stats had increased by 1 point. Unlike the skill upgrades that came with targeted training, this felt a broken bar random. He flexed his arm experimentally, a subtle surge of strength coursing through his muscles. His mind raced, searching for an explanation. Was it a reward for his recent progress, or was the bully system subtly enhancing him in preparation for something bigger? A shiver ran down his spine. The lack of explanation was unsettling. The system seemed to operate on its own whims, doling out rewards and punishments with an impersonal efficiency. He yearned to understand its purpose, its ultimate goal. But for now, all he could do was accept this unexpected boost and continue training. As James closed his eyes, focusing on his breath, he felt a distinct change within him. It wasn't just the physical increase in strength. There was a sharper clarity in his thoughts, a newfound sense of focus. Could this be the effect of the increased stats, or was it something more? He wasn't sure, but one thing was certain: the bully system was more than just a way to gain combat skills. It was changing him, both physically and mentally. Back in his room, James collapsed onto his bed, the weight of the day pressing down on him. The upgraded skills were a welcome boost, the stat increase an unexpected bonus, but the upcoming fight with Sauroff loomed large. Punching a pillow or punching bag just wouldn't cut it anymore. He needed proper training, a structured environment to hone his skills and learn new techniques. The idea of joining a gym sparked in his mind. Just as he was about to voice this thought to his mother, a new notification flickered on the blue window, sending a jolt of surprise through him. It wasn't the usual skill upgrade message. Instead, bold letters spelled out, Mission 7, join a gym. Reward, loop mission. Penalty, risk a random slap from your sister. James stared at the message, his jaw slack. So, the system was actively encouraging him to join a gym? It made sense, considering the upcoming fight. But the reward, a loop mission, was a mystery. What did that even mean? And the penalty, a random slap from his sister? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Lily's playful taps were one thing, but a full-on, system-powered sisterly slap? No thanks. He mulled over the options. Joining a gym was a good idea, regardless of the system's prompting. But the penalty, a broken bar, could he risk it? The answer came in a flash: a number. He couldn't explain the random slap, nor did he want to endure his sister's potential wrath. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, James bypassed the whole asking his parents for a gym membership route. He knew most gyms wouldn't accept a minor like him. However, a memory sparked in his mind. His father occasionally mentioned an old friend, Reva, who had retired from the police force and opened a small, family-oriented gym. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. After school, James walked with a determined stride towards the address his father had mentioned years ago. The gym itself was unassuming, tucked away in a quiet corner of the neighborhood. A worn sign above the door proclaimed it Reva's Fitness Den. Taking a deep breath, James pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air buzzed with the muffled clang of weights and the rhythmic grunts of people exercising. The gym wasn't huge, but it was well equipped, with a mix of cardio machines and free weights. A woman with short, steely gray hair and an aura of quiet authority stood behind the reception counter, wiping down a pair of dumbbells. She glanced up at James, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like she could bench press James himself. James, suddenly feeling a touch self-conscious, stammered, "Hi. My name is James Khan. My dad, he mentioned you might be able to help me." He wasn't sure how much to reveal, but mentioning his father seemed like a safe bet. A flicker of recognition crossed the woman's face. "James? You must be Samuel's son. He hasn't mentioned you in ages. What can I do for you?" James explained his situation. He mentioned his desire to learn how to defend himself and get in better shape. As he spoke, he noticed Reva studying him intently. "Self-defense, huh?" she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Well, James, it seems you've come to the right place. Let me guess, schoolyard bullies giving you trouble?" James flushed slightly, surprised at her perceptive guess. Before he could respond, Reva continued, "Look, James, I might be retired from the force, but I still know a thing or two about handling bullies. And let me tell you, a strong body is only half the battle. Confidence is key. So, are you serious about learning?" James straightened his back, a newfound determination hardening his gaze. "Absolutely," he said, his voice firm. "I'm ready to learn." Reva's smile widened. "Good. she said, clapping her hands together. Then let's get started. James diligently filled out the registration form Reva provided. As Reva stamped it with a firm hand, a familiar blue window flickered into existence, surprising him. Mission complete. You have unlocked loop mission. Curiosity piqued, James focused on the window, waiting for further information. In response, a detailed table materialized, outlining the newly unlocked loop missions. These weren't like the previous mandatory missions. They presented a series of workout routines with clear goals and potential stat increases as rewards. Mission, goal, reward. Running, 2 km, 0.1 con. Push-ups, 100, 0.1 str. Bicep curls, 50 by 2 kg, 0.01 attack speed. Lat pull-downs, 50 by 4.5 kg, 0.1 str. Squats, 50, 0.05 dex. Lunges, 50, 0.05 dex. Plank, 1 minute, 0.1 int. Jump rope, 200, 0.1 wis. Bicycle ride, 5 km, 0.1 con. If you complete all of these tasks in a single day, your charm will increase by 1. The weight and reward may change. Eager to put the loop missions to the test, James dove headfirst into his workout with Reva's watchful eye. At first glance, the list of exercises seemed manageable: a simple jog, some push-ups, squats, and lunges. A triumphant grin spread across James' face. This wouldn't be a problem. But underestimating the physical demands was a rookie mistake. As James powered through the first few sets of push-ups, his initial confidence began to wane. His muscles screamed in protest, his arms shaking with exertion. By the time he reached the squats, his legs burned like they were filled with lead. The lunges were the final straw. His form faltered with each repetition, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Finally, with a defeated groan, James collapsed onto the gym mat, his body a trembling mess. Reva, unsurprised by his exhaustion, chuckled softly. "Welcome to the wonderful world of getting in shape, James," she said, handing him a water bottle. "Those exercise routines might seem easy on paper, but trust me, they'll push you to your limits." James gulped down the water, his chest heaving. Shame flushed his cheeks. He'd thought he was prepared, but the reality of physical exertion was far different from his initial bravado. "Don't worry," Reva reassured him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Everyone starts somewhere. The key is consistency. Take it slow, listen to your body, and gradually increase the intensity." Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are bulging biceps. James offered a weak smile. Reva's words were a welcome dose of reality. He might have the system egging him on, but true progress came with dedication and hard work. "All right," he said, forcing himself to sit up straighter. "I get it. Today's a rest day." Reva nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Your body needs time to recover. Come back tomorrow, and we'll tackle those daily workout routine again, but at a pace that works for you." Leaving the gym, James stretched his stiff muscles, a newfound respect for physical training settling in. He glanced at a nearby bicycle shop, the idea Reva had planted taking root. A bicycle for the loop missions, and maybe some comfortable shoes for those morning jogs. A broken bar. A plan began to form in his mind. With a determined stride, James picked up his pace, a small smile playing on his lips. With running he also can complete his running loop mission. A dull ache throbbed in James' arm as he gazed out the classroom window. 3 days of training under Reva's watchful eye had left him pleasantly sore. Gone was the initial overconfidence. Now, a healthy respect for physical exertion tempered his enthusiasm. Today, however, the familiar rhythm of school life felt strangely off-kilter. The usual cacophony of hushed whispers and nervous giggles was subdued. There were no shoving matches in the hallway, no mocking laughter echoing in the corridors. An unsettling quiet hung in the air. James scanned the classroom, his gaze landing on the empty seat beside him. Emdad, his one and only friend within the school's walls, was missing. A pang of loneliness tugged at his heart. He remembered overhearing Emdad's parents mentioning a business trip overseas a few days ago. James couldn't help but let out a silent sigh. The privilege of the filthy rich, he thought bitterly. Here he was, stuck in the daily grind while Emdad jetted off on exotic adventures. The frustration was quickly overshadowed by a flicker of concern. Emdad wasn't just a friend, he was also a potential target for the school's resident bullies. Without James' unofficial protection, would Emdad become the new focus of their harassment? The thought sent a jolt of unease through him. He couldn't stop the bullies entirely, but he could at least be a deterrent within the school grounds. His contemplation was abruptly interrupted by a crumpled piece of paper sailing towards him, landing on his desk with a soft thud. He unfolded it cautiously, his eyes widening at the message scrawled across it in messy handwriting. "Meet me at the park after school, alone. Don't be late." The blood drained from James' face. He recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Ryan, the mastermind behind the judo club challenge. A knot of apprehension formed in his stomach. Was this about the fight with Sauerhoff, or something more sinister? He glanced around the classroom, searching for any sign of Ryan, but the smug smirk was absent. Taking a deep breath, James scribbled a quick reply on the back of the note. "Fine, be there." He shoved the note back into his pocket, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Today's peaceful quiet seemed like a cruel joke. A dull throb pulsed in James's hand with every subtle movement, a constant reminder of his limitations. 3 days at the gym had left him pleasantly sore, yes, but also painfully aware of his poor physical condition. Completing all the loop missions in a single day felt like a distant dream. He winced as he gripped his pen, the simple act a testament to his newfound weakness. Despite the throbbing pain, a flicker of gratitude sparked within him, a wave of appreciation washing over Coach Jin. In the haze of anger and the system's cryptic message that day at the judo club, James had been consumed by a reckless desire to prove himself. Blinded by bravado, he hadn't stopped to consider the physical disparity between him and Sauerhoff. It was a foolish act, fueled by pride and a complete disregard for his own safety. Now, with the ache in his hand a constant reminder, James understood the potential consequences of facing Sauerhoff unprepared. Coach Jin's intervention, though humiliating at the time, had prevented him from making a grave mistake. It was a lesson James wouldn't soon forget, a lesson scrawled not in ink on paper, but in the throbbing ache of his muscles. The crumpled note in his pocket felt heavier now, the weight of the upcoming meeting pressing down on him. Was Ryan trying to intimidate him further, or was there something more at play? The lunch bell clanged, a jarring counterpoint to the knot of apprehension twisting in James' stomach. He shoved his notebook into his bag, the crumpled note a constant reminder of the looming confrontation. During lunch, James couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every snicker, every raised eyebrow felt like a potential lead-up to Ryan's promised meeting. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, James decided to take the initiative. He scanned the schoolyard, his gaze landing on a lone figure sitting beneath a sprawling oak tree. It was Ryan. James approached cautiously, his muscles tensed for a fight. As he got closer, however, he noticed something unsettling. Ryan was alone. No posse of bullies, no menacing grins. Just Ryan, hunched over a book, his brow furrowed in concentration. Tentatively, James cleared his throat. Ryan looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before morphing into a smug smirk. "So, you decided to grace me with your presence, Khan," he drawled, his voice laced with mock civility. James met his gaze unflinchingly. "Why'd you call me out here, Ryan?" Ryan leaned back, a playful glint in his eyes. "Ah, straight to the point. I like that. Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" He gestured vaguely towards the empty space beside him. "Sit." James hesitated for a beat, then lowered himself onto the grass, keeping a wary eye on Ryan. Ryan hesitated for a moment before blurting out, "Look, about the other day." His voice trailed off, replaced by a frustrated sigh. James narrowed his eyes, waiting for an explanation. Finally, Ryan blurted out, "I know you were only trying to protect Millie because you're, well, in love with her." James' jaw dropped. This outlandish accusation came completely out of left field. Where in the world did Ryan get this idea? Love with Millie? What are you talking about? He sputtered, completely bewildered. Ryan puffed out his chest, a hint of defiance flickering in his eyes. "Don't play dumb, James. I saw the way you were looking at her. And besides, It's obvious. Why else would you try to challenge Saueroff? James shook his head, dumbfounded. I challenged Saueroff because he was picking on a weak kid like me. Millie had nothing to do with it. Ryan's shoulders slumped slightly. He seemed to deflate, the bravado replaced by a hesitant vulnerability. Look, he mumbled, kicking at a stray pebble. If you join the judo club, I'll leave Millie alone. I won't bother her anymore. He paused, then added in a near whisper, I'll even help you get together with her. James stared at Ryan, completely at a loss for words. The situation was baffling. Was Ryan trying to make a deal? Was this some elaborate scheme concocted by the bully system? James now thinks what's happening surrounding him because of bully system. Hesitantly, James spoke. I appreciate the offer, Ryan, he said, his voice cautious. But joining the club isn't something I can decide on a whim. And as for Millie, he trailed off, searching for the right words. I don't have any feelings for her like that. She's just a friend. Ryan's face fell. He looked like a kicked puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Oh, he mumbled, kicking at the pebble again with more force this time. But, James continued, seeing a flicker of hope in Ryan's eyes, I will tell you this, I'm going to win that match against Saueroff. Ryan looked up, a flicker of something akin to respect in his gaze. All right, he said, a hesitant nod accompanying the words. But you better win. The tension between them seemed to dissipate, replaced by a fragile truce. James wasn't sure what Ryan's true motives were, but for now, this was enough. He had a fight to prepare for, his training with Reva to focus on, and the ever-present mystery of the bully system looming over him. As James turned to leave, Ryan called out after him, Hey, James? James stopped, turning back to face him. Good luck with the match, Ryan said, a hint of sincerity in his voice. James nodded silently. James had barely taken a step away from Ryan when a familiar blue window flickered into existence, its presence a cold slap of reality amidst the fragile peace he'd just established. He groaned, burying his face in his hand for a moment. Of course, the system wouldn't let him have a moment of quiet. He steeled himself and focused on the message, his jaw dropping as he read it. Mission 8, ask Millie for a date. Reward, +3 whiz. Penalty, struck by thunder. James's eye socket, still sore from the previous notification overload, threatened to pop out again. Ask Millie for a date? Seriously? He barely knew the girl beyond a few stolen glances and a shared dislike for bullies. And the penalty, struck by thunder? The system was bordering on sadistic with this one. The blue notification window pulsed with an almost mocking intensity. James felt a wave of frustration wash over him. This mission was absurd, an unwelcome complication on top of the already precarious situation with Ryan. He rubbed his temples, trying to think of a way out. Asking Millie out based on a forced mission felt disingenuous, considering she had already mentioned having a crush on someone else. But the system rarely offered wiggle room, and the penalty getting struck by lightning was a risk he wasn't willing to take. With a resigned sigh, James decided to confront the situation head-on. He navigated the bustling hallways, finally spotting Millie amidst a group of chattering girls. She turned, her eyes widening slightly in surprise as James approached. Millie, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wondering. A broken bar. He trailed off, his cheeks warming under her curious gaze. Millie tilted her head, her eyes wide with innocence. Yes. James took another deep breath, blurting out, would you a broken bar? Would you be willing to wait for me after school today? She replied, her voice barely audible. What's up? James swallowed hard. I just wanted to talk. He offered a weak smile, hoping it wouldn't come across as too forced. About something. The school bell echoed through the halls, a jarring counterpoint to the nervous drumming in James' chest. He stole a glance at Millie, who sat a few desks ahead, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously highlighted a passage in her textbook. Every stolen moment felt like a stolen glance, the weight of the mission a constant pressure. He could practically feel the expectant gaze of the system, urging him on. James wasn't sure if he was more nervous about asking Millie out or the potential consequences of failing the mission. Finally, the shrill bell echoed through the halls, its discordant tone a welcome signal for James. He bolted out of his seat like a sprinter leaving the starting blocks, his eyes scanning the throng of students flooding the corridors. He spotted Millie leaning nonchalantly against a wall near the school exit, her arms crossed and a hint of defiance in her posture. With a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic drumming in his chest, James weaved through the chattering crowd, his palms growing slick with sweat with every step closer to her. "Hey, Millie," he greeted, offering a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Hey, James," she replied, tilting her head slightly. "What did you want to talk about?" James hesitated, his carefully constructed plan dissolving under her curious gaze. "Well," he stammered, "I was wondering, maybe you'd like to." He trailed off, the words sticking in his throat. This was ridiculous. Asking someone out on a date based on a system-generated prompt felt more like a bad prank than a genuine interaction. "Like to what?" Millie prompted, a hint of amusement dancing in her eyes. James closed his eyes, bracing himself. "Like to go out sometime," he blurted out. "Maybe grab some food at the new cafeteria across the street?" The amusement in Millie's eyes morphed into surprise. She opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated. "Actually, James," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "I appreciate you asking, but I'm not really interested. I have already told you, someone else I have in mind." With that, she waved goodbye and turned away, heading towards the bus stop. James' heart sank. Rejection, even when anticipated, never felt good. A familiar ache bloomed in his chest, a flicker of disappointment mingling with a surprising undercurrent of relief. He wasn't interested in Millie romantically, but the pressure to secure a date had gnawed at him nonetheless. Now, with her gentle rejection, that pressure lifted. But before he could dwell on his mixed emotions, a notification flashed in the blue window. "Mission complete, ask Millie for a date, +3 whiz." His jaw dropped. He'd failed. He braced himself for the electric shock, the vengeful strike of lightning. A broken bar, but nothing happened. He stared at the window, confusion clouding his mind. Had the system malfunctioned? Then, a new thought struck him. Maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't looking for a romantic connection. Maybe the act of asking someone out, of pushing himself outside his comfort zone, was the true goal. The +3 whiz boost seemed to support that theory. A small smile tugged at James' lips. He hadn't gotten the date, but he'd gained something far more valuable: a new perspective on the system's enigmatic ways. And perhaps, a newfound confidence to approach people, even if it wasn't for a date. As Millie walked away, James watched her go, a sense of acceptance settling over him. He took a deep breath, the weight of the mission lifting from his shoulders. The familiar ache in his muscles was a welcome reminder of a day well spent. Despite the exhaustion, a triumphant grin spread across his face as the blue window flickered into existence. Mission complete, all loop missions +1 CHA. He'd done it. Every push-up, squat, lunge, the system's seemingly mundane tasks had pushed him to his limits, and his body felt the sweet sting of accomplishment. This wasn't just about the points, it was about proving something to himself. It was about clawing his way back from the helplessness he'd felt just facing down Sauroff, about etching a new image of himself, one that wasn't defined by fear or the whims of the bully system. Each drop of sweat, each burning muscle, was a testament to his will, a brick laid in the foundation of his own personal strength. Sure, the points were nice, a tangible reward for his efforts, but the true victory was the shift within. He wasn't just stronger, he felt a newfound resilience, a confidence that stemmed from perseverance. Reva's chuckle echoed in his mind. "Welcome to the wonderful world of getting in shape, James," she'd said. Her words, once laced with amusement, now rang true. James wasn't just stronger, he felt a newfound resilience, a confidence that stemmed from perseverance. As he rounded the corner onto his street, the familiar quiet settled over him. An unsettling calm, he'd thought just days ago. But now, with the absence of Lemon's taunts and the ever-present threat of the bully system's goons, the tranquility felt almost a broken bar peaceful. Was this a temporary reprieve, or a sign of something more? James couldn't shake the feeling that the calm before the storm was upon him. The system was a fickle entity, and its silence often heralded a new challenge. With renewed determination fueled by his accomplishment, James hurried towards his house. The aroma of his mom's cooking wafted through the doorway, a promise of comfort and a welcome distraction. The school hallways felt strangely charged that day. Despite the exhaustion clinging to James like a second skin, a prickle of unease ran down his spine. Millie kept stealing glances his way, her gaze lingering for a beat too long each time. Was she still annoyed by his awkward date request? The whole encounter replayed in his mind, bringing a fresh wave of self-consciousness. He tried to catch her eye, hoping for a friendly smile or a wave, anything to dispel the awkwardness. But Millie quickly averted her gaze each time, leaving James feeling like a social pariah. Deciding to avoid the confusing situation altogether, James kept his head down, navigating the hallways like a lone wolf. Later, as James rounded a corner, he nearly collided with Ryan. Ryan, however, seemed unfazed. A wide grin stretched across his face, a stark contrast to the nervous energy James had witnessed at the park. James stared at him, incredulous. This was the same guy who tormented him for weeks, the one who'd orchestrated the ridiculous judo challenge with Saurov, a challenge that could have gotten him seriously hurt. Now, he was acting like some newfound friend. The nerve! James felt a surge of anger, a potent blend of annoyance and distrust bubbling within him. He wasn't about to forget Ryan's past actions, or the way he'd used Millie to manipulate James. "Don't talk to me," James muttered through gritted teeth, pushing past Ryan without another word. Ryan's grin faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. He opened his mouth to speak again, but James was already gone, leaving Ryan alone in the echoing hallway. The library doors loomed before James, a stark contrast to the bustling hallways he'd just navigated. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight filtering through the high windows, a silent testament to the time that had passed since his last visit. It felt like a lifetime ago, a time before the system, before the loop missions, before the constant pressure and ever-present threat of violence. Back then, the library was a sanctuary, a haven of knowledge where he could lose himself in the pages of a well-worn book. Now, it felt like a forgotten realm, a place he'd subconsciously avoided. A shiver ran down his spine as he stepped through the doorway, the silence broken only by the soft creak of the aged floorboards beneath his feet. He scanned the seemingly endless rows of bookshelves, a pang of guilt twisting in his gut. He'd neglected this place, his haven, for far too long. Suddenly, the familiar blue window flickered into existence, its message a stark contrast to the serenity of the library. Mission 9, find the martial arts book written by Jihad Chanmia and read it within 7 days. Reward, all your stats will increase by +2. Penalty, all of your stats will be sealed under 5 points for 30 days if you fail to read it within 7 days. James' eyes widened. A +2 boost to all his stats? That was a significant incentive. But the penalty, a crippling reduction in his stats for a month, was terrifying. A smug smile tugged at James' lips as he stared at the mission prompt. Find a book on martial arts. Easy. Back in the day, he devoured adventure stories and anything with a hint of action. Locating a single book shouldn't be a problem. Confidence bolstered, James pushed open the library doors, the scent of aged paper and forgotten knowledge a familiar comfort. He scanned the seemingly endless rows of books, his gaze flitting across titles. Martial arts wasn't a genre he'd actively sought before, but surely it wouldn't be buried deep within the library's labyrinth. Minutes bled into what felt like hours as James wandered the aisles, his initial confidence dwindling with each fruitless search. Martial arts for beginners, the history of swordsmanship, and a dusty tome on self-defense for housewives. None of them matched the specific title demanded by the mission. Frustration gnawed at him. This wasn't supposed to be this difficult. The system rarely offered clear explanations, but a single, obscure title felt like a deliberate roadblock. Defeated, James slumped into a nearby chair, the weight of the mission notification pressing down on him. He glanced at the library counter, where Rupali, his upperclassman and the ever-patient library keeper, was organizing a stack of books. Taking a deep breath, James approached her, his voice edged with a hint of desperation. "Excuse me, Rupali, do you, by any chance, have a book titled Martial Arts by Jihad Chanmia?" Rupali looked up, a smile lighting up her face. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of concern as they took in James' disheveled appearance. He looked different from the usual James, the one who used to spend his afternoons lost in a fantasy novel or a historical biography. This James seemed a broken bar tense, his brow furrowed and his posture rigid. Martial Arts by Jihad Chanmia, she repeated, a hint of amusement dancing in her voice. That's a very specific title, James. What brings you to this particular book? James hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It's, for a project, he mumbled, hoping the explanation wouldn't sound too flimsy. Ruperly's smile widened. A project, huh? Well, then you're in luck. We do have that book. She disappeared behind the counter for a moment, her movements smooth and practiced. Within seconds, she emerged again, a worn leather-bound book held in her hand. Here you go, she said, placing the book gently on the counter. It's not exactly light reading, but it's quite comprehensive. I'm surprised someone your age is interested in this kind of book. James stared at the book, relief washing over him. He mumbled a thanks, unsure how to explain his sudden and very real need to learn about martial arts. Ruperly's curiosity was evident, but thankfully, she didn't press the issue. With a final smile, she gestured towards a quiet corner of the library. Go ahead and take a seat over there. Let me know if you need anything else, she said. And if you're looking for something a little less a broken bar traditional, we have a whole section on self-defense techniques in the back. Not everyone learns best from dusty old books. James nodded his gratitude. James cracked open the worn leather cover, the aged paper whispering promises of forgotten knowledge. The initial pages unfolded like a typical martial arts manual, detailed descriptions of stances, blocks, and strikes accompanied by faded illustrations. He flipped through them with a practiced ease, recognizing some of the basic techniques from movies and video games. It was a good starting point, but a nagging feeling told him there was more to this book than met the eye. As he delved deeper, his initial skepticism melted away. The explanations became progressively more intricate, not just detailing the moves themselves but also dissecting their weaknesses and limitations. Counter techniques were laid out with a clarity that surprised him, accompanied by diagrams that showcased pressure points and vital targets with an almost clinical precision. This wasn't just a manual for beginners, it was a treatise on combat, a strategic guide designed to turn understanding into application. Hours melted away as James devoured the text. Sunlight streamed through the dusty library windows, painting shifting patterns on the worn floorboards. He barely noticed the time passing, his focus consumed by the intricate dance of offense and defense laid bare before him. Finally, with a yawn and a stiff neck, he glanced out the window. The familiar orange glow of dusk bathed the school grounds in a warm light. He blinked, surprised by how quickly the day had flown by. The library was deserted. Ruperly, the ever-present librarian, had gone home for the day. James stretched, his muscles protesting the prolonged sitting. With a newfound respect for the book's depth, he carefully closed it and made his way to the counter. Following the library's borrowing procedures, James meticulously filled out a slip, recording his name, student ID, and the book's title. A strange sense of accomplishment washed over him. He wasn't just borrowing a book, he was taking a step towards a new reality, one where self-defense wasn't just a concept, but a potential weapon in his arsenal against the system and the bullies it empowered. Slipping the book into his bag, James exited the library. The setting sun cast long shadows, and a cool breeze ruffled his hair. He took a deep breath, the crisp evening air filling his lungs. Exhaustion clung to James like a second skin as he stumbled out of bed the next morning. The fluorescent lights of the school bathroom assaulted his sleep-deprived eyes, highlighting the dark circles clinging to his face. Last night had been a blur of flipping pages, fueled by a potent mix of desperation, the looming deadline, and genuine fascination. The book's depth. He hadn't slept a wink, his eyes glued to the detailed diagrams and intricate explanations within Martial Arts by Jihad Chanmia. Pushing through the ache in his head, James made his way to the gym. Each exercise felt heavier than usual, his muscles protesting the all-nighter, but he pushed himself harder than ever. He had a goal, a mission accomplished, and the lingering exhaustion felt oddly satisfying. Back at home after his workout, James devoured the remaining chapters of the book. A sense of accomplishment washed over him as he closed the worn cover with a sigh. His eyes felt gritty, His body ached, but a grin stretched across his face. It had been worth it. The notification flickered into existence, the blue letters a welcome sight amidst the exhaustion. Mission complete. Find and read Martial Arts by Jihad Chanmia. +2 all stats. The promised stat boost surged through him, a tangible reward for his sleepless night. But beyond the numbers, James felt a deeper sense of satisfaction. He understood basic stances, strikes, and blocks. He could identify pressure points and vital targets. More importantly, he knew the limitations of each move, the potential weaknesses that could be exploited. He wasn't a master by any means, but he was no longer helpless. Knowledge was power, and James, for the first time, felt empowered. The thrill of newfound knowledge mingled with the exhaustion. He collapsed onto his bed, the weight of the book a comforting presence on his chest. Sleep claimed him instantly, the events of the day replaying in his mind like a fast-forwarded movie. Exhaustion finally wrestled James into a deep sleep. The harsh glare of the morning sun wouldn't bother him today. It was a school holiday. His overworked brain finally received the respite it craved. Dreams filled with intricate martial arts maneuvers danced behind his closed eyelids. A gentle aroma, a symphony of spices and simmering goodness, infiltrated his sleep. The unmistakable scent of his mother's cooking tugged at his subconscious, pulling him closer to wakefulness. He cracked open an eye, blinking at the sunbeams filtering through his blinds. A wave of satisfaction washed over him. No more blaring alarms, no dreaded walk to school, and most importantly, no bullies lurking in the shadows. Today, he could simply be. He savored the quiet, the knowledge that for once, he was in control of his own time. A soft rapping on his door jolted him awake. "James, honey, are you up?" His mother's voice called out. He stretched languidly, the tiredness slowly receding. "Almost, Mum," he called back. The anticipation of a delicious lunch fueled his movements. He showered, surprised by the newfound lightness in his steps. Maybe it was the extra sleep, or maybe it was the feeling of accomplishment after finishing the martial arts book, or maybe because his stats increased all at once. A faint smile played on his lips. He emerged from his room to find his mother setting a steaming bowl of noodles on the table. The scent was even more enticing than he'd imagined. Her eyes crinkled at the corners as she saw him. "Finally awake, sleepyhead? You look exhausted." James chuckled. "Just a late-night study session, Mom," he said, knowing the truth was a little more a broken bar complex. They sat down together, the clinking of chopsticks a comforting rhythm. James devoured his lunch, the flavors exploding on his tongue. The tension that had clung to him for so long seemed to melt away with each bite. "So, what's on your agenda for today?" his mother asked, her voice full of gentle curiosity. James paused, considering. "I was thinking about going to the park," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "There's some practice I need to do." His mother raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "Practice, huh? Well, whatever it is, I know you'll do great." A warm wave of contentment washed over James as he finished his lunch. The delicious meal, coupled with a good night's sleep, felt like a magic potion, mending the physical and mental strain from the previous night. He decided to indulge in a short afternoon nap, his body craving a little more rest before tackling the day's plans. Later, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows, James found himself at the park, the familiar scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers filling his senses. Today, the park wasn't just a refuge, it was a training ground. His sneakers pounded the pavement, a steady rhythm accompanying his determined breaths. He aimed for at least 10 kilometers that day, pushing his body further than usual. The system's ever-present demands fueled his determination. A significant boost in stats was within reach, and he wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his legs burning with exertion, but James pressed on. Each kilometer conquered was a small victory, a testament to his growing strength. As he rounded a bend, he spotted a group of teenagers gathered near the basketball court, their laughter echoing in the air. They paused, their gazes falling on James, his focused expression and determined stride a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. Ignoring their stares, James reached a secluded area of the park, a large oak tree offering a patch of shade. Here, he transitioned from running to a series of shadowboxing exercises. He focused on his form, remembering the detailed illustrations from the martial arts book. His right leg pivoted, his core twisting as he threw a powerful uppercut in the air. This particular move, designated as the kangaroo cut by the system, felt surprisingly natural, the knowledge from the book translating smoothly into physical execution. A couple walking their dog stopped to watch, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and amusement. James caught their gaze, a fleeting moment of self-consciousness flickering within him. But the feeling was quickly replaced by a surge of pride. He wasn't ashamed of his training, his newfound dedication to self-improvement. In fact, the strange looks only fueled his resolve. They didn't understand, but that didn't matter. He was doing this for himself, for his own strength and survival in this strange world ruled by the system. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, James finished his training session. His body ached, his lungs burned, but a deep sense of satisfaction filled him. He'd pushed himself, learned a new move, and most importantly, he'd taken another step towards reclaiming control of his own life. Exhaustion tugged at James' limbs, urging him to head straight home. His muscles ached pleasantly, a testament to his rigorous training. He glanced at the fading light, the sky ablaze with the fiery hues of dusk. Just a few more steps and he'd be back in the comfort of his own home, a steaming cup of tea and a warm meal waiting for him. As he rounded a corner, however, a cacophony of jeering laughter snagged his attention. Curiosity, a nagging itch, replaced his desire for home. He peeked around a cluster of trees, his heart sinking at the sight before him. A group of older teenagers, their faces twisted into cruel smirks, surrounded a smaller figure. At first glance, James mistook the girl for an older woman. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, stretched taut over the generous curves of her body. Her round face, flushed with tears, was framed by hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Each shuddering breath strained the buttons of her blouse, revealing a glimpse of soft, pale skin beneath. She stood hunched over, her posture a reflection of their taunts,